Everyone laughed when Gu spent his last 800 yuan on an F-tier Taoist class nobody else wanted. That joke died quickly after his evolved lightning began erasing monsters with damage no graduating student could even measure. Gu was an orphan whose 2 natural awakenings had already failed, leaving him too poor to buy a respectable combat class. His new Palm Thunder needed 30 seconds to charge and initially dealt only 33 damage. Then a hidden evolution system granted him 10 billion points and promised another 100,000 every day. Those points could permanently improve attributes, skills, and equipment instead of offering temporary boosts. Gu evolved Palm Thunder into a heaven-tier divine lightning art before finishing his first dungeon trial. Its first real casts produced 9-digit damage, proving the class everyone mocked could become a one-shot weapon. Hours earlier, Gu had stood inside benching First High School's Awakening Hall, with his final chance disappearing in front of him. 2 independent awakenings had failed, so buying and fusing with a class was the only path still open. The counselors asked what he could afford, and Gu quietly admitted that 800 yuan was everything he had saved. Laughter spread through the hall because even the weakest combat classes normally cost many times that amount. In this world, dungeons and secret realms had appeared after the cataclysm, and humanity survived by awakening ranked classes. Classes ranged from F-tier to SSS tier, with combat professions receiving the highest prices and the strongest public respect. Gu had no parents or wealthy relatives backing him, so those 800 yuan represented years of small jobs and careful saving. The counselor eventually found one forgotten option, priced exactly within his budget. An F-tier Taoist class gathering dust in storage. Nobody wanted it because Taoists were famous for terrible growth, unreliable accuracy, weak skills, and almost non-existent damage. One trained Taoist had once celebrated dealing roughly 100 damage, which only made the class sound even more hopeless. Gu's homeroom teacher urged him to keep the money and pursue an ordinary academic future instead of gambling everything on trash. She was trying to protect him, but Gu had spent 3 years preparing for the national entrance examination and refused to quit now. The fusion completed, and his classmates immediately mocked the poor orphan for choosing a profession they considered useless. Gu ignored them and opened his new status panel, wanting facts instead of opinions. His body remained at beginner standards, while his agility was actually worse than many combat students his age. The only skill he received was Palm Thunder, a slow attack whose damage scaled from his spirit attribute. With his starting spirit, the spell dealt 33 damage after a 30-second charge and then entered a long cooldown. The class rating suddenly made perfect sense because a monster could cross the room and kill him before that attack finished charging. Their teacher announced that the graduating class would immediately travel to Dreadshade Forest for the school's beginner dungeon trial. Kills there mattered for future examination preparation. Yet she warned Gu that entering with his current class could get him killed. His classmates refused to party with him, claiming his weak attack would only steal experience while forcing everyone else to protect him. The contempt hurt more because these were students who had studied beside him for 3 years. Before Gu could answer, a golden interface appeared inside his vision, where nobody else could see it. The 10 billion evolution system bound itself to him and immediately deposited 10 billion evolution points. It also promised another 100,000 points every day, giving him a resource ordinary class holders could never obtain naturally. The rules were simple enough to understand. At once, evolution points could improve attributes, skills, and equipment permanently. The systems always slid the cost and final result before confirmation, so Gu could calculate every upgrade instead of gambling blindly. Palm Thunder became the obvious first target because its weakness was the clearest reason everyone considered his Taoist class worthless. Gu nearly laughed when he saw the enormous balance, but he closed the interface before anyone noticed his reaction. Only he could see the system, and exposing a power like this inside a crowded school hall would create far more danger than mockery. Gu still refused to brag because numbers on a screen meant nothing until they survived contact with a real dungeon. If the system failed, he would remain an F-tier Taoist with one pathetic spell and no reliable party. If it worked, the people judging his future by class rank were about to learn how meaningless that label could become. His teacher again suggested going home, but Gu calmly insisted on joining the Dreadshade Forest trial. She finally allowed it and reminded him to keep the school return scroll close, enough to activate during an emergency. Before entering, Gu tested the safest possible enhancement by adding 100,000 points directly into Spirit. The conversion worked exactly as promised, raising the attribute permanently without hidden fees or temporary timers. Palm Thunder's damage jumped from 33 to more than 50,000, even before the skill itself evolved. Gu resisted the temptation to dump the entire balance into Spirit because an unknown dungeon could punish such a one-dimensional build. More health, speed, equipment, and future skills might matter later, so he preserved almost all of his 10 billion points. The school bus reached Dreadshade Forest, where vendors surrounded a dark vortex leading into the beginner dungeon. Heartbeat accelerated, because this would be the first place where the system's promises faced something capable of killing him. Xiaoying approached before entry, surrounded by followers, and showing off his newly awakened, a tier full moon swordmaster class. His family was influential in benching, and expensive preparation had already given him better skills, equipment, and support than ordinary students. Xiaoying offered Gu a party slot, only if the orphan called him father in front of everyone. Gu understood the humiliation immediately because the party was already full, meaning Xiaoying never intended to keep his promise anyway. Instead of getting angry, Gu asked how much damage the A-tier swordmaster could currently produce. Even with family-funded skills, Xiaoying was nowhere near the damage Gu's unevolved Palm Thunder could already deliver. Gu declined the fake invitation and told him they could compare results after the dungeon instead. Parties entered the vortex one after another, while Gu deliberately crossed alone so nobody could witness his system in action. Once he reached an isolated section of the damp forest, he reopened the interface and selected Palm Thunder. Maximum evolution cost only 200,000 points, an amount so small beside 10 billion that Gu confirmed instantly. Palm Thunder transformed into Primordial Chaos, 9 Heavens Divine Thunder, a heaven tier skill far beyond beginner standards. The evolved technique cast instantly, had no cooldown, reached thousands of meters, and consumed only a small amount of mana each time. Its damage scaled explosively from Spirit, turning Gu's earlier 100,000 point investment into an absurd offensive foundation. With his current statistics, one cast now exceeded 100 million damage before any future critical effect. Gu checked the return scroll anyway, because overwhelming power did not justify becoming careless inside an unfamiliar dungeon. A swarm of bloodthirsty jungle bees attacked first, filling the air with poisonous stingers from multiple directions. Gu raised one finger and released the evolved lightning before the nearest insect could reach him. Cold light crossed the forest, and every bee disappeared into ash under damage hundreds of thousands of times higher than its health. The kills belonged entirely to Gu, because he had entered alone, so the experience notification immediately pushed him to level 2. Ordinary student parties would have needed repeated fights and then divided the reward among several members. Gu discovered that his divine lightning could control an entire area instead of striking only one fixed target. His spirit let him distribute attacks across the full range, making dense monster groups easier than single enemies had once seemed. Mana became the only immediate limitation, since his beginner pool allowed only a finite number of rapid casts before recovery mattered. Even that weakness was manageable, because the skill regenerated enough mana for another attack after a short wait. Gu continued deeper, while other students remained near the outer zone, carefully fighting low-level monsters one group at a time. By the time classmates were still celebrating their first safe kills, his level had already climbed toward the school's trial requirement. The forest boss, Sinister Trent, waited far beyond the area teachers expected graduating students to approach safely. Xiaoying had warned his own party to stay away, because even strong beginners could die against a level 10 sus. Gu treated that warning as useful information, rather than a challenge, checking mana and surroundings before moving into range. 9 Heavens Divine Thunder struck once, and the boss's health vanished so quickly that its cantics never had time to matter. The lightning visible from outside the boss zone terrified nearby students, who assumed a level 50 powerhouse had entered their beginner dungeon. Teachers issued an emergency withdrawal order because they feared their students might accidentally offend that unknown expert. Gu answered his teacher's message and prepared to leave without explaining that the frightening lightning had actually come from him. Before walking away, he noticed a faint green glow inside the boss remains and remembered that dungeon loot could hide beneath debris. The drop was a pair of heroic quality tempered steel shoes, his first piece of valuable equipment. Their basic effect was modest, but heroic quality gave the evolution system a much stronger foundation than ordinary gear. Gu learned that equipment qualities progressed from ordinary through heroic, epic, legendary, and finally transcendent. He hid the glowing shoes inside his bag because a poor student openly carrying rare gear would invite questions he could not answer safely. The national entrance examination required level and a complete ordinary equipment set, giving Ju2 practical goals for the coming days. Leveling no longer worried him, but equipment drops remained unpredictable, so every cleared battlefield now deserved a careful search. Xiao Ying threatened Gu again after leaving the dungeon, yet the orphan had already stopped seeing him as a serious measure of strength. On the bus ride home, Gu used the system on his new shoes, instead of wasting energy arguing with classmates. Their evolution consumed only a small fraction of his remaining points, and pushed the footwear far beyond its original heroic quality. The upgraded boots became transcendent cloud chasings, boots of 10,000 miles, granting enormous agility and a long-distance movement ability. Gu had not even reached level 10. Yet, he already possessed equipment that wealthy families would struggle to obtain at any price. He kept the boots hidden, because their appearance alone could expose how abnormal his progression had become. Later that evening, Gu returned to the dungeon district, while wealthy students arrived with hired escorts and family-funded equipment. Dreadshade Forest could no longer provide enough experience, so he selected the higher difficulty, Frostbound Dojo, instead. A city soldier advised the lone graduate to stay with beginner content, sincerely warning that overconfident students died every year. Gu thanked him, bought a map, and entered the frozen dojo alone, because the danger there finally matched the power he needed to test. Frostbound Dojo immediately showed why difficulty 2 was considered dangerous, with ice surrounding narrow passages where slower beginners could be trapped. Gu switched into the transcendent boots and discovered their enormous agility bonus changed how the entire dungeon looked to him. Monsters that should have been fast enough to pressure a beginner now seemed painfully slow whenever they tried to close the distance. He still avoided careless teleportation because appearing inside an unseen monster pack could waste the advantage before he understood the terrain. Instead, Gu moved through open sections normally and used divine lightning whenever several ice guards gathered within the same firing line. Reflected flashes turned the frozen corridors white, while damage numbers far above the monster's health appeared across the battlefield. The attacks erased entire formations, yet repeated casting finally emptied Gu's small mana pool and left his body weak for several moments. That weakness exposed the first serious flaw in his build. His damage was ridiculous, but his beginner mana still limited sustained combat. Gu waited for regeneration, rather than spending evolution points impulsively, wanting to learn how the dungeon behaved before changing his statistics again. The deeper zone mixed freezing flowers, fast imps, direwolves, and other monsters, designed to overwhelm parties through different status effects. Their coordination would have been brutal for ordinary students, but Gu's range let him destroy several threats before their abilities overlapped. Every kill increased his experience, though the amount needed for each new level was already rising sharply. By the time he approached the boss room, leveling had slowed enough to prove that easy dungeons would become inefficient very quickly. Frost Fiend Venerable waited at level 15, with several thousand health and attributes that could crush most graduating students in direct combat. Gu studied the boss before attacking because stronger dungeons might eventually contain mechanics that raw damage could not safely ignore. One cast of 9 Heaven's Divine Thunder ended the test anyway, overwhelming the boss before its marrow-piercing ice skill could matter. The result pushed Gu another level higher and confirmed that his offensive ceilings still sat far than difficulty he was challenging. More importantly, the boss left behind a glowing skill book instead of ordinary equipment. It was Blazing Saber Art, a profound tier warrior skill that Gu could not learn because his primary class was Taoist. The drop was still valuable because profound tier books could sell for huge sums, enough to cover ordinary tuition many times over. Gu returned from the dungeon at midnight, surprising the guard who assumed the teenager had simply wandered around the safest outer region. Nobody imagined the lone F-tier Taoist had already erased the dojo boss with the same spell he used on ordinary monsters. Back home, Gu examined the skill book and discovered the evolution system could improve items even when his own class could not use them. The system offered to evolve Blazing Saber Art for only 200,000 points, an almost irrelevant expense beside his remaining balance. Gu confirmed, and the profound tier book transformed into Vermilion Bird Skybreaker, a heaven-tier warrior skill. That created an entirely new opportunity. Because a heaven-tier book was not simply expensive, it was almost impossible to find openly. Gu could not use it himself, so selling the book would convert a tiny number of evolution points into real money and connections. He listed it anonymously on a civilian marketplace, expecting wealthy buyers to appear once they verified the item's quality. Attention exploded almost immediately because the listing made no sense, beside the seller's apparent age, location, and dungeon history. A heaven-tier skill freshly appearing after a difficulty 2 run contradicted everything experienced class holders knew about drop rates. Gu refused to explain its origin, since revealing the evolution system would be worth far more than any sale price. The Chung family contacted him through Lu Jinglin, a calm representative who understood the book's real strategic value. Instead of threatening Gu, Lu Jinglin treated the transaction seriously and admitted that money alone could not easily measure a heaven-tier skill. Great families valued such techniques because one suitable skill could strengthen an heir, influence descendants, and change their long-term position. Gu stayed cautious during the negotiation, prepared to escape if the meeting turned into an attempt to seize the book by force. Lu Jinglin's restraint convinced him. The Chung family wanted cooperation more than a short-term robbery. The final arrangement brought Gu enormous financial value, high-grade equipment, and access to resources he could never have reached as an orphan. One reward included an epic equipment set that immediately solved much of the ordinary gear requirement for the national examination. Another was a rare soul summoning skill book, which interested Gu far more than cash because the system might transform it into something extraordinary. He also learned that the Chung family was investing heavily in its young heir, Chung Yu, whose future class potential justified massive spending. Gu returned home with more wealth than he had ever imagined, yet his attention remained fixed on the new summoning skill. The next day's automatic deposit added another 100,000 evolution points, confirming the system's daily growth rule worked exactly on schedule. Gu studied soul summoning before learning it, allowing the interface to show the evolution result and cost in advance. 2 million points could push the ordinary summoning foundation into a completely different level, still leaving almost all of his original fortune untouched. He confirmed the evolution and obtained Netherworld, Yellow Springs Emperor Summoning Art, a technique tied directly to his total attributes. The summoned Nether Emperor would inherit scaling from Gu's combined statistics, meaning every future level and equipment upgrades strengthened both of them. That synergy was far more valuable than a fixed damage summon, because Gu's system could keep increasing the foundation indefinitely. Before testing the new summon publicly, Gu selected a higher difficulty dungeon, where strong monsters could absorb at least part of its power. Around the entrance, experienced class holders offered paid carrying services to weaker newcomers who experiences. A B-tier alloy warrior and a healer approached Gu, promising protection for several thousand yuan per hour. Their attitude changed the instant they learned he was an F-tier Taoist, showing how deeply class rankings controlled people's expectations. Xiaoing appeared again and mocked anyone willing to bring Gu into a serious dungeon, still believing the earlier lightning belonged to an unknown expert. This time, Xiaoing arrived with powerful family bodyguards, whose levels were far beyond ordinary graduating students. Their presence made the threat more dangerous, because a death inside a dungeon could be blamed on monsters without leaving easy evidence. Gu entered anyway, now treating Xiaoing's hostility as a real security problem instead of childish school bullying. The higher difficulty dungeon rewarded that risk with denser monsters, better experience, and enemies strong enough to justify using his new summon. Gu first fought alone, letting Divine Lightning clear groups, while he measured experience gains and watched for hidden mechanics. When the dungeon became crowded with monsters, he finally activated Netherworld, Yellow Springs Emperor Summoning Art. Purple light gathered into the Nether Emperor, a terrifying figure whose power came from Gu's total attributes, rather than the dungeon's level. The summon accepted Gu as master and waited for an order with an intelligence completely unlike ordinary disposable creatures. Gu commanded him to eliminate every monster in the area, wanting to test both obedience and independent combat judgment. The Nether Emperor vanished into purple light, moving so quickly that Gu could follow only the direction of the bond between them. Experience notifications began arriving from distant sections almost immediately. proving Foss Summon was clearing enemies far beyond Gu's line of sight. Every new level raised Gu's own attributes, which then increased the Nether Emperor's level and damage. In the middle of the same operation, the feedback loop made the summon stronger while it killed, turning dungeon progression into a process that accelerated itself. Gu continued toward the central region, while his experience climbed faster than any normal student could manage with a full party. The Lord of the Inferno eventually appeared as the dungeon boss, carrying attributes dangerous enough to kill ordinary solo class holders around its level. Gu could have erased it with Divine Lightning, but he wanted to see what the Nether Emperor did against a boss with real defenses. The summon returned only after confirming every monster Gu had ordered him to kill was actually dead, including enemies that had already begun respawning. That literal interpretation of the command revealed both his reliability and the need for Gu to phrase future orders carefully. The Nether Emperor attacked the boss with damage measured in billions, making the Inferno Lord's defensive mechanics completely irrelevant. Gu's summon had become so strong that a difficult boss died more easily than beginner monsters had before the system appeared. The battle also confirmed that the Nether Emperor could act independently without draining Gu's attention every second. That mattered because Xiaoying's bodyguards were already moving through the dungeon with intentions far more dangerous than competition. The group included high-level combat and support classes who believed Gu remained a helpless student separated from witnesses. They tried to corner him after the boss fight, confident their equipment, levels, and numbers made resistance impossible. Gu recognized that the confrontation was no longer school harassment when one attacker aimed directly at a lethal point on his body. Instead of panicking, he let the Nether Emperor return to his side and watched the attackers realize they had misunderstood the entire dungeon. A heavily armored shield general charged first, using his defense to cover a killing blow meant to end the fight instantly. Purple light pierced through armor and shield together, and the attacker collapsed before his weapon could reach Gu. The remaining bodyguards finally understood that the being who had cleared the dungeon was not a wandering expert Gu happened to meet. It was Gu's own summon, bound to the F-tier Taoist they had entered the dungeon expecting to murder. Their strongest defenses meant nothing against damage measured in billions, and escape became impossible once the Nether Emperor controlled the area. Gu did not need to chase anyone personally because the summon moved faster than the bodyguards could react or activate emergency items. Xiaoying's confidence collapsed when the family power protecting him in the real world stopped mattering inside the sealed dungeon. Bounced something. One life-saving treasure allowed him to survive the first fatal outcome by transferring his consciousness through a prepared substitute. The escape proved his family had expected danger, but it also revealed how seriously they had prepared for conflicts beyond normal student competition. Gu allowed no surviving attacker to continue the ambush, making certain the people who had tried to kill him could not simply regroup nearby. When the fighting ended, the Nether Emperor dissolved into faint purple mist and concealed himself around Ju outside ordinary sight. Gu left the dungeon at level 9, only one level below the national examination's formal requirement. He now possessed Divine Lightning, a terrifying summon, rare equipment, and enough real combat experience to make the F-tier label meaningless. Still, Gu understood that Xiaoying's family would not ignore the loss of several powerful bodyguards and an expensive survival treasure. That danger gave him another reason to keep his strongest abilities hidden from the public whenever possible. Gu equipped the epic set obtained through the Chung family, raising several weak physical statistics without spending unnecessary evolution points. The set gave him a balanced base for ordinary fighting, while the transcendent boots remained hidden for emergencies and long-distance movement. His agility now exceeded what most people expected from a Taoist, reducing the risk that an enemy could simply rush past his spellcasting range. Gu also kept the Nether Emperor close enough to respond if the Xiao family attempted retaliation outside a dungeon. The original goal had been merely reaching level 10 and gathering ordinary equipment before the examination. After only a few dungeon runs, Gu was already approaching that threshold with resources, skills, and enemies far beyond anything he expected. The next opportunity arrived through the Chung family, which wanted Gu to lead its young heir into a rare experienced secret realm. Lu Jinglin arranged the meeting carefully because the experienced secret realm pass could accelerate a young heir's growth more effectively than ordinary dungeon farming. Gu chose familiar surroundings and kept both the Nether Emperor and Transcendent Movement boots available, in case the negotiations suddenly became hostile. The Chung family had already proven generous, But one successful transaction was not enough for Gu to abandon basic caution around powerful strangers. Their requested companion was Chung Yu, a wealthy young heir with an S-tier Divine Dragon Bloodguard class and enormous family expectations. Chung Yu arrived half asleep and visibly annoyed. Yet Lu Jinglin ordered him to address Gu respectfully before discussing the secret realm. That formality established who would command inside, because a spoiled heir ignoring instructions could turn a valuable opportunity into a fatal mistake. The family offered Gu more than another cash payment, presenting a formal executive position in a company controlled by Lu Jinglin. The appointment came with continuing dividends, recognized social status, and the resources Gu would need after leaving benching for university. For an orphan who had survived on savings and part-time work, a stable network was worth more than a single impressive transfer. Gu accepted only after confirming that he could terminate cooperation if Chung Yu violated his instructions inside dangerous content. The secret realm opened for just the two of them, giving Gu direct responsibility for an heir whose family had invested heavily in his future. Chung Yu initially treated Gu like an ordinary peer, still unaware how far the F-tier Taoist had already surpassed normal student progression. Inside, a special monster called Light Shade generated huge experience under unusual rules, making the realm valuable despite its short time limit. Chung Yu's S-tier class, high-grade equipment, and Heaven-tier Vermilion Bird skill already made him exceptional among students his age. Gu recognized the irony because that Heaven-tier technique existed, only because he had evolved and sold the original skill book days earlier. Rather than exposing every secret, Gu let Chung Yu fight enough to reveal his real ability, while measuring how the secret realm produced waves. Once the mechanism became clear, Gu summoned the Nether Emperor and allowed the clearing speed to increase beyond anything the heir expected. Experience began flooding both party members, and Chung Yu's pride quickly gave way to disbelief. As levels arrived faster than normal training allowed, Gu reached level 10 during the surge, but did not stop, since every additional level strengthened his body and the Nether Emperor simultaneously. He also increased his maximum health dramatically, turning a fragile caster's greatest weakness into another statistic the systems could solve directly. 1 million additional health, combined with percentage-based regeneration, meant being surrounded would no longer threaten him the way it once had. Chung Ju continued killing nearby targets. Yet the difference between his elite S-tier performance and Ju's clearing speed became impossible to ignore. The Nether Emperor could erase enemies across the realm, while Gu handled another section, effectively creating two overwhelming farming zones at once. Their combined pace suppressed the monster generation rate itself, something the secret realm clearly had not been designed to experience. Gu's levels climbed through the teens, 20s, and 30s, while his base statistics increased automatically with every breakthrough. By the end, he reached the mid-30s, transforming a student who had entered his first dungeon days earlier into a completely different existence. Chung Yu gained enormously as well, but even he understood that his progress had depended on following Gu rather than leading the run. The heir's attitude changed during the secret realm because repeated results gave him more evidence than any family introduction ever could. Outside, Lu Jinglin immediately noticed the level increase and understood that Gu's real value was much greater than the Heaven-tier book he sold. The Chung family had gained a powerful ally, whose growth rate could not be explained by money, class rank, or ordinary dungeon luck. Gu returned home with enough savings to live comfortably. Yet he ordered a normal meal instead of wasting money simply because poverty had ended. His attention shifted toward Fujian University, where geniuses from across Yuan Nation would make a level in the 30s far less remarkable. The entrance requirement was already irrelevant, so Gu set a new goal of building practical combat experience before entering in that stronger environment. Chung Yu soon appeared at his apartment with gifts and announced that he also planned to attend Fujian University instead of the school chosen earlier. Lu Jinglin had to arrange special admission, but the family's influence and resources made that change possible despite the inconvenience. Chung Yu even tried to improve Gu's living conditions, only to learn that generosity did not give him permission to control the older brother figure. Gu accepted useful cooperation while refusing unnecessary dependence, preserving the independence that had protected him before the system ever appeared. He researched higher difficulty dungeons and chose content that could challenge level 30 class holders without wasting time on weak monsters. Public information warned that difficulty 8 demanded real teamwork, But Gu needed a battlefield where his current power could finally be measured honestly. Before departure, another wealthy student, Chu Tianming, appeared with a strong party and an obvious desire to compete against Chengyu. Chu Tianming possessed a powerful dual image class and family backing that placed him among the strongest young people around benching. His party mocked Chengyu's choice to travel with an F-tier Taoist, treating Gu as dead weight attached to a famous heir. Gu refused to start a fight at the entrance because killing rivals over insults would only create legal problems and waste the dungeon opportunity. He entered with Chengyu instead, deciding the fastest answer would be reaching the boss before Chu Tianming's supposedly superior team. The dungeon's monsters were strong enough to punish ordinary level 30 parties, making route selections and clearing speed important from the beginning. Roll! Gu switched briefly into the Transcendent Boots and summoned the Nether Emperor, then sent the summon forward to clear the dangerous route. He and Chengyu followed through the opening created behind it, conserving their own resources while summon erased enemies too quickly to surround them. Because the boots granted extreme movement, Gu could also cross sections at speeds that left almost no conventional tracks behind. Chu Tianming's party advanced normally, fighting through every monster formation, while assuming their rivals remained somewhere behind them. When they finally reached the boss zone, Gu and Chengyu were already waiting, without visible injuries or signs of exhaustion. The rival party searched for teleportation traces and shortcuts, unable to understand how two people had passed the entire route without crossing their path. Chengyu happily repeated Gu's own advice, that people should not ask about things they were not prepared to understand. Chu Tianming proposed settling the competition through the boss, declaring that whichever side secured the kill would win. Gu made him choose the attack order first, preventing the rival party from later claiming the rules had been changed after seeing his strength. The boss, King of Ruinous Gold, carried enough health and defense to make ordinary parties coordinate their strongest skills around limited openings. Chu Tianming's side attacked seriously, producing damage impressive for students and confirming that his family's resources had not been wasted. Their performance still remained within a range Gu could understand, unlike the billions of damage now attached to the Nether Emperor. When Gu's turn arrived, the summon attacked once, emptying the boss's health before anyone could properly process the difference. The golden body remained standing for a brief moment, only because physical inertia had not caught up with the damage already registered. Once it collapsed, the boss dropped several valuable items, confirming that higher difficulty content rewarded far richer loot than beginner dungeons. One drop was not equipment or a normal skill book, but a second class that could permanently bind to a class holder. Unlike ordinary techniques, a second class could not be learned, removed, and sold later without consequences, so choosing a recipient mattered greatly. Gu studied the options instead of grabbing everything automatically, because permanent progression could become a weakness if the classes conflicted. Chu Tianming's attitude softened after seeing the boss vanish, since the result had destroyed every assumption behind his earlier ridicule. His own dual-element mage class was already excellent, making some second-class rewards less useful to him than they would be to others. Chengyu also understood that forcing ownership could damage a relationship worth far more than one dungeon drop. The group divided rewards according to usefulness rather than pride, giving Gu opportunities to convert otherwise unsuitable loot into long-term value. Among the most interesting rewards was an alchemist's second class, a profession capable of turning formulas and ingredients into permanent economic power. Gu waited until leaving the dungeon before binding it, refusing to reveal another unusual progression event in front of people who had only recently met him. The system could not freely replace a bound second class, so he confirmed the decision only after reviewing every warning. Once bound, the alchemist class linked success rate to spirit, making Gu's unusually high attribute immediately useful outside direct combat. His starting probability already exceeded what many trained alchemists could achieve, even though he had never refined a single pill before. That advantage came from the same spirit foundation, originally raised to make Palm Thunder useful, showing how one early decision kept creating new benefits. Gu also received a support aura and immortal radiance among his growing abilities, widening his toolkit beyond pure lightning damage. His attributes continued rising, and the Nether Emperor's calculated power increased from roughly 2 billion towards 6 billion as the foundation expanded. The summon therefore became stronger without needing separate trainings, skill books, or equipment of its own. Gu tested basic alchemy carefully because a high displayed success rate did not guarantee every individual batch would succeed. More difficult formulas imposed additional pressure, and failed ingredients still represented real money, even if evolution points remained plentiful. He learned that ordinary alchemists could spend years building the spirit, experience, and formula, knowledge needed to reach stable production. Gu's system shortened only part of that path, leaving ingredient acquisition and actual formula knowledge as problems he still had to solve normally. That limitation pleased him more than a completely automatic profession because it revealed exactly where future resources should be invested. Cheng Yu and Chu Tianming, meanwhile, carried their dungeon rivalry into daily life, but both now treated Gu's instructions far more seriously. Chu Tianming's earlier decision not to support Xiaoing against Gu also strengthened the relationship created during their competitive run. Gu did not demand loyalty speeches, preferring to judge both young heirs by what they did when real danger appeared. The next dungeon opportunity involved stronger undead enemies and a much higher difficulty, giving the new group a chance to prove that trust. Before entering, Gu prepared equipment, healing resources, and emergency options. Rather, Selenis assuming billion summons damage made planning unnecessary. The city soldier at the entrance remembered him as the student who had once entered low difficulty content alone, and warned him again, and that guard had no idea Gu now stood around level 37, with attributes that surpassed what his visible class should ever possess. Gu thanked him anyway, because sincere caution from an uninformed person was not the same thing as deliberate contempt. Inside, level 40 undead and bone monsters appeared immediately, proving this dungeon was designed for experienced class holders rather than recent graduates. Cheng Yu fought more actively now, using the experience gained in the secret realm, instead of relying entirely on Gu's protection. Gu let him handle manageable enemies, because inflated levels meant little if the heir never learned how his own abilities behaved under pressure. When attacks threatened from multiple directions, Gu offered brief warnings instead of clearing the field, forcing Cheng Yu to build genuine combat judgment. Their progress revealed something strange. The number of ordinary monsters was far lower than expected for a dungeon of this difficulty. Skill, marks, broken bones, and disturbed ground showed that another party had passed through recently and was moving directly toward the boss. That changed the run from routine training into a race, because an unknown group could take the boss, loot, or trigger a dangerous mechanic first. Gu accelerated without abandoning formation, keeping the Nether Emperor available, while following traces deeper into the undead territory. Near the central zone, the party finally encountered evidence that someone else was already fighting the dungeon's strongest monster. The boss was Bone Venerable, a level 59 undead creature with curses, heavy physical power, and a hidden resurrection mechanic. Gu approached the battlefield ready to test not only his own new abilities, but whether this intelligent boss could survive long enough to reveal them. Bone Venerable's first phase combined heavy punches, death curses, and repeated shockwaves, forcing the nearby party to keep moving instead of trading hits directly. A female saber user, named Ning Xinggu, circled the boss effectively, but the curse of death gradually slowed her reactions despite her strong technique. Gu watched long enough to understand the pattern before stepping in, because an intelligent boss could hide mechanics that raw damage might trigger accidentally. When Bone Venerable committed to another attack, Gu released Divine Lightning into its exposed chest and emptied the first health bar instantly. Instead of ending, the undead body reassembled under Divine Resurrection, proving the boss had a second phase hidden behind its apparent death. Its levels and attributes rose sharply. Dark gold patterns spread across the bones, and the resurrection skill disappeared from the status panel. That missing entry told Gu the second death should be permanent, but the stronger phase still carried enough power to threaten everyone nearby. Gu deliberately summoned the Nether Emperor instead of finishing the battle himself, wanting to test how the upgraded summon handled an intelligent high-level enemy. The Emperor shattered the boss's attacking arm first, then drove billions of damage through the remaining body before it could rebuild another defense. Only after the system awarded the full boss experience did Gu relax, confirming that Divine Resurrection had truly been consumed, and the kill was complete. Ning Xinggu approached afterward to thank the stranger who had saved her party, asking for Gu's name and address so she could repay him later. Gu refused politely, because identities inside dungeons could be unreliable, and involving new people unnecessarily would create more risk for Cheng Yu as well. Chung Yu became uncomfortable when Gu distributed valuable drops generously, insisting that receiving rewards without contributing to the boss fight felt wrong. Gu treated party cooperation differently from shop accounting, explaining through his actions that useful allies could contribute through resources, obedience, and future support. One reward was a limitless divine physique pill that temporarily raised every attribute, making it valuable for emergencies even without permanent growth. Another involved priest support, while the alchemist materials and formulas gave Gu practical opportunities to use his newly bound second class. He discovered the system could evolve skill books and equipment, but it treated learned alchemy formulas as knowledge, rather than objects that could be enhanced. That distinction prevented Gu from simply turning every cheap recipe into a divine formula and forced him to respect normal alchemy progression. His high spirit still provided an enormous advantage, producing success rates that veteran refiners would consider exceptional for a complete beginner. Gu began making practical pills whose temporary attribute boosts could be sold, stored, or given to teammates before dangerous dungeon runs. Even modest enhancements mattered, because a frontline fighter could combine several legal buffs before activating a class burst for a much larger final gain. Chung Yu benefited especially, since his aggressive style consumed health and resources quickly whenever he pushed Divine Dragon Blood Guard abilities to their limit. The group carried hundreds of high-quality potions, allowing him to train through mistakes that forced an ordinary student to retreat. Their next route led toward content where return scrolls could become unreliable, making preparation more important than the visible difficulty number alone. Gu studied the mission description carefully because some dungeons allowed retreat, while others sealed every class holder inside until the objective was completed. A strange entrance eventually pulled them into a hidden difficulty 50 scenario, far above the content Gu originally intended to challenge that day. The mission immediately warned that nobody could leave until completion, transforming a profitable exploration into a commitment that could interfere with the college examination. Gu considered retreat before the lock finalized, since even overwhelming damage did not justify missing the national test for an unknown reward. The hidden dungeon offered a random skill book and other rewards, but the real problem was determining whether inside could survive long enough. On the coast, waves of black creatures attacked a collapsing town, whose people had resisted the same enemy for generations. The monsters were around level 70, high enough that ordinary recent graduates would have been erased before understanding the mission. Gu's level difference did not reduce the experience reward, confirming that the hidden scenario followed fixed rules, rather than ordinary open dungeon scaling. He lifted a child named Yaya out of immediate danger, while lightning swept through the attacking wave around the beach. Dense notifications filled his panel, and the enormous number of enemies pushed his level from the high 30s into the low 50s within seconds. That single wave granted more progression than the special experience realm, showing why mandatory hidden missions could become extraordinary opportunities for someone strong enough. After the beach cleared, Yaya returned to her mother, and both villagers thanked Gu before leading him into the damaged settlement. Broken defenses, ruined homes, and exhausted civilians made the mission feel less like a temporary arena and more like a living place approaching extinction. The mayor explained that their ancestors had fought the black monsters for centuries, while each new attack destroyed repairs faster than people could rebuild them. Only a handful of major assaults remained before the entire population would be wiped out. Yet the townspeople still refused to abandon their homeland. Gu understood that simply farming recurring waves would earn experience but fail the actual objective, because the source of the attacks would remain untouched. The mission required protecting the town and removing the mother organism driving the invasion. So endless defensive kills were not enough. He left the broad battlefield to the Nether Emperor, while he searched for information about the sea route and the creature controlling the waves. The summon could destroy incoming monsters faster than civilians could even see them approach, buying the town time without exposing Gu to every direction at once. Gu also used his growing resources to strengthen defenses, understanding that the mission might test rebuilding progress in addition to raw combat success. His evolution balance had barely changed despite repeated upgrades, and another daily deposit reminded him how absurdly deep the original 10 billion reserve remained. When the system offered to improve an important support ability, Gu accepted because hidden mission uncertainty mattered more than preserving a tiny fraction of points. The resulting upgrade strengthened his ability to operate in hostile conditions, reducing the risk that one unexpected environment effect could end the entire mission. After securing the shoreline, Gu activated a barrier and entered the sea to locate the Blackwater Mother, rather than waiting for another surface attack. Underwater movement introduced a new problem, because ordinary land-based combat assumptions became unreliable once visibility, pressure, and direction changed simultaneously. His enhanced attributes and protective equipment prevented the sea itself from becoming dangerous, letting Gu focus on the monster colony instead. The Blackwater creatures gathered around a massive level 98 mother organism, whose statistics dwarfed everything Gu had encountered in ordinary dungeons. For most class holders, reaching the boss would have required an entire high-level party, specialized equipment, and a plan for fighting beneath the water. Gu's divine lightning ignored that expected difficulty, while the Nether Emperor's scaling had already risen far beyond what the boss's health could withstand. Blackwater Mother died quickly, giving enough experience to push Gu through additional levels and finally ending the source of the town's recurring monster waves. The result completed the hidden objective more effectively than camping on the beach, because the civilians no longer faced an endless cycle of rebuilding and destruction. One reward was a universe fragment that added a massive permanent amount to every base attribute, strengthening Gu's entire foundation at once. Unlike equipment bonuses, those points belonged directly to him, meaning future skills and summons could scale from the improvement without depending on a particular set. The Nether Emperor benefited immediately because his level and damage were calculated from Gu's total attributes rather than from a separate progression system. Numbers that had already reached billions rose again so dramatically that Gu began worrying more about controlling collateral damage than increasing raw attack power. A second reward was almost insulting by comparison, an ordinary peachwood sword with only a tiny strength bonus despite the difficulty. 50 mission. Gu briefly decided never to trust random rewards again, only for the final item to make that disappointment disappear almost immediately. The last reward was 3 Pure One's Heart Method, an Earth-tier passive skill with a permanent increase to casting speed. It offered little immediate benefit to instant divine lightning, but any future long chant technique would become dramatically easier to use under pressure. Because the passive occupied no equipment slot after learning, its value continued forever, without Dichizu to sacrifice another item or active skill. The Taoist compatibility also mattered, since many rare books he had found earlier belonged to warriors or other classes he could not use personally. Gu evolved additional suitable equipment and skills only after checking costs, refusing to spend millions merely because the starting balance looked inexhaustible. One evolved weapon became the Azure Lotus Sword of the Supreme Tao, giving him a proper offensive item that matched the growing Taoist theme. The weapon's value extended beyond basic statistics because evolved equipment could carry ability unavailable on ordinary gear of the same visible category. Gu combined the new sword with his expanded attributes, support effects, and transcendent movement options, creating far more flexibility than his original caster build. His status panel now looked nothing like the F-tier template classmates had mocked during the awakening ceremony only days earlier. Health and mana had grown enormously. Physical attributes had crossed thresholds normally associated with far more advanced class holders, and spirit remained his strongest foundation. Divine Lightning handled overwhelming area damage. The Nether Emperor supplied independent battlefield control, and Immortal Radiance strengthened the usefulness of support effects. Gu also retained the Alchemist second class, allowing resources gathered from dungeons to become useful consumables rather than items he could only sell. The hidden town stabilized after the mother organism died, and the surviving residents finally had a chance to repair their defenses without another immediate wave. Gu could not remain long enough to see what the settlement might become years later, so he trusted the mission rules to preserve the completed outcome. Then he checked the time and realized the National College entrance examination was less than an hour away. The absurd hidden mission had nearly trapped him beyond the start time, despite all the progression and rewards he had gained inside. Gu switched to the cloud-chasing boots and used their long-distance movement skill because ordinary transportation could no longer get him there in time. The hidden dungeon exit happened to lie within the technique's effective range, giving him one clean chance to cross the distance before registration closed. Gu appeared near the examination site with little time to spare, then concealed the transcendent Sisha 4, anyone could connect them to the arriving F-tier student. The national examination used tracking bands that recorded kills inside a special dungeon and converted different monsters into points. Funan University demanded a much higher score than ordinary schools. Turning the exam into another test, Gu could not treat casually despite his strength. Ordinary monsters provided small amounts, while bosses offered far larger rewards, but could respawn only a limited number of times during the 3-day period. That rule prevented a strong student from camping one boss indefinitely and forced examinees to keep moving if they wanted elite university scores. Xiaoying arrived around level 19, stronger than average students, and once again confident that family investment had restored the gap between them. His visible statistics and class were genuinely impressive for a graduate, which explained why teachers and classmates still treated him as a serious candidate. Gu entered without arguing, since comparing examination results would expose the difference more cleanly than another confrontation at the entrance. Red-furred hyenas surrounded him first, using pack behavior to create an inner attack ring while another group blocked retreat. A normal party could have been overwhelmed by bites, intimidation, and simultaneous pressure on the back line before anyone established formation. Gu limited his lightning field deliberately and erased the entire pack without damaging terrains outside the area he wanted to control. The tracking band counted every kill separately, immediately adding enough points to prove the scoring system recognized his attacks normally. A 3-headed nightmare wolf later appeared as a boss, carrying several thousand health and suppression abilities, dangerous to ordinary candidates. One lightning strike ended it and delivered the boss bonus, pushing Gu's score upward far faster than conventional farming routes allowed. The examination should have become simple from there. But Gu soon noticed people inside the dungeon who did not behave like students or official proctors. Their clothing differed from city military uniforms, and their movement suggested they were searching for specific targets instead of supervising the test. Gu refused to attack based only on suspicion, because harming legitimate observers could disqualify him, even if his instincts proved understandable afterward. He checked identification through the tracking band and found that several strangers lacked the proctor credentials expected from authorized examination staff. The discovery pushed the Nether Emperor's protective range closer, allowing the summon to intercept an ambush without revealing himself unnecessarily. Gu continued, earning points while memorizing faces and positions, treating the strange group as a possible threat, rather than abandoning the exam immediately. That caution became essential when the national test suddenly shifted from a university competition into a coordinated attack on the students inside. The suspicious outsiders finally revealed themselves when transformed attackers began hunting examinacies instead of monsters, turning the national test into an active rescue emergency. City military forces could not simply terminate the entire dungeon because Strauch and Sable's Kinshins underskulls might kill students, still scattered through distant regions. Gu's first priority was identifying enemies correctly, since the battlefield now mixed hostile infiltrators, frightened candidates, legitimate proctors, and rescuers moving through the same terrain. One wounded survivor outside reported that an attacker could transform into a beast, giving officials their first clue that the threat resembled Black Sun Rose. That organization had disappeared from public attention for years, so its return inside a national examination immediately raised the situation far beyond ordinary student violence. Gu encountered one transformed man, whose mark drove muscle, bone, and blood toward a monstrous state, rather than merely applying a simple attribute buff. The longer the transformation continued, the more chaotic the man's mind became, until almost nothing remained in his eyes except killing intent. He originally wanted information, but nearby examinees could not survive if he waited for an unknown higher stage to finish activating. 9 Heaven's Divine Thunder fell once and carbonized the attacker before he could complete either the transformation or his final question. The result exposed a weakness in Gu's overwhelming lightning. It was excellent for killing, but terrible for leaving a dangerous target alive for interrogation. Next time, he would need to disarm an enemy first or let the Nether Emperor suppress them before asking questions. Gu avoided summoning the Emperor openly, because surveillance covered the examination, and dealing billions would cause another nationwide security panic. Among the remains, he recognized black and red cloth, matching a marker Xiaoying had displayed before the test. That connection did not prove the entire Xiao family belonged to Black Sun Rose, but it made their previous hostility far more dangerous. Gu suspected the attackers had entered with a planned target list rather than merely trying to disrupt the examination randomly. Searching the enormous dungeon for Xiaoing would waste time, so Gu kept earning points and allowed the hostile network to come looking for him instead. Deeper inside, he found 2 injured female examinees, surrounded by a disciplined group of adult attackers, using a coordinated capture formation. One enemy blocked the front, 2 sealed lateral escape routes, and a hidden ranged fighter prepared to punish anyone forced into the air, who deliberately insulted the group so their attention shifted away from the wounded students and focused entirely on him. The attackers responded exactly as he hoped, abandoning their original victims and moving into positions designed to trap a single target. Before Gu released lightning, a silver-armored woman suddenly entered from the side and destroyed part of their formation with a spear. Her movements were precise and efficient, using the weapon's shaft, rotation, and forward momentum without wasting a single unnecessary step. The Soul Guard Bureau insignia on her armor identified her as an official rescuer rather than another infiltrator. She ordered Gu to escort the wounded students out, assuming the lone teenager was another examinee caught in a battle beyond his level. Gu tried to stop her from killing every attacker immediately, because he still needed someone alive, long enough to reveal the group's identity. During that brief distraction, another transformed enemy attacked from behind while deliberately creating a noise in the ice opposite direction. The silver-armored rescuer could have dodged, but doing so would expose the injured students directly behind her to the heavy weapon. Gu answered first with a lightning blossom, turning the attacker into charcoal before the weapon completed its downward swing. The remaining enemies charged together, and Gu physically moved the rescuer aside before his next attack cleared the immediate threat. Her surprise was almost greater than the students, because she had entered expecting to protect Gu and instead watched him erase enemies she considered dangerous. After the fight, she identified the organization as probably Black Sun Rose and warned Gu to contact City Military or Soul Guard Bureau forces immediately. Another silver-armored officer arrived and addressed her as Captain Ning, revealing that Gu had just fought beside the leader of a rescue team. The newcomer saw only a student among charred bodies and naturally assumed Captain Ning had done most of the fighting. He criticized Gu for refusing evacuation, believing the teenager was creating another protection burden while rescuers searched for students under attack. Gu calmly answered that he had never asked them to protect him and still intended to finish the examination before leaving. Captain Ning stopped the argument and linked a dedicated emergency channel to Gu's tracking band without adding surveillance or altering his examination score. She left the choice with him, asking only that he activate the channel if another serious threat appeared nearby. Ning also warned Gu not to destroy his body for one spectacular high-damage technique, assuming the lightning required a forbidden physical sacrifice. Gu allowed the misunderstanding, because explaining 10 billion evolution points would be far more dangerous than letting officials believe he possessed a costly trump card. Captain Ning checked his pulse and mana circulation anyway, finding no weakness, life force damage, or obvious backlash after repeated lightning attacks. She respected his refusal to explain the skill's principle and recorded only that he should leave immediately if his condition changed. The misunderstanding protected Gu's secret while still giving him an official rescuer who could confirm he had helped rather than harmed other examinees. The next morning, 100,000 additional evolution arrived on schedule. Even though the examination dungeon remained under emergency conditions, Gu resumed clearing isolated monster regions, deliberately avoiding dense student groups where wide lightning could create unnecessary risk. After each fight, he checked the surrounding ground for black and red cloth, footprints, or other evidence that another infiltrator unit had moved nearby. He needed only a limited number of additional points to reach Funyun University's admission line, so every Monster 6 now served a specific purpose. The next three-headed nightmare wolf represented exactly the kind of high-value target that could close the remaining gap efficiently. Before Gu reached it, another Black Sun Rose formation surrounded him, confident that an F-tier student could be killed with ordinary weapons first. Several attackers blocked the woods and retreat paths while a distant archer prepared to punish any attempt to escape the encirclement. None of them noticed the Nether Emperor concealed nearby, because Gu had ordered the summon to remain hidden unless the situation required him. Gu told the group they had misunderstood the formation. They had not surrounded him because every one of them stood inside his attack range. Divine lightning ignited from the center and killed several active attackers at once, while deliberately leaving the leader alive for questioning. The Nether Emperor transmitted obvious disappointment through the contract, but Gu kept him concealed because these enemies did not justify revealing another trump card. Surviving leader finally realized that the mysterious lightning expert, destroying Black Sun Rose members, was the examinee they had repeatedly underestimated. Gu demanded surrender before acting again, hoping a higher-ranked member might know why the organization had entered the national examination. Instead, the man triggered a more complete beast transformation, with black energy following fixed marks across his chest, arms, and brow. Bone armor emerged across his shoulders while his body expanded, and even the nearby nightmare wolf lowered its heads instinctively beneath the transformed aura. The leader then activated a sealing technique that disconnected Gu from active class skills and temporarily removed Divine Lightning from immediate use. The ability was dangerous because most class holders built their entire combat system around skills that vanished the instant the seal took effect. Gu tested his internal panel and confirmed the restriction did not erase equipment abilities, passives, states, or effects already active before the seal. The Black Sunrose leader expected a sealed Taoist to become helpless, because ordinary transformed defenses could withstand basic attacks from most class holders. He had never fought someone carrying a transcendent weapon whose attached ability functioned independently from the sealed skill bar. Gu drew the Azure Lotus Sword of the Supreme Tao and activated Immortal Slaying Absolute Formation through the equipment itself. Sword energies formed around the leader in layered positions, blocking retreat, lateral movement, and direct charges, before the formation even reached full capacity. Gu did not wait for maximum accumulation, because the sealing field remained active, and another hidden transformation stage could still appear. The first sword energy pierced the transformed defense, and the attacks behind it followed automatically, until the leader's health disappeared. Once the caster died, the sealing field collapsed, and Gu's active skills returned immediately. He stopped the formation at once, because continuing to generate sword energy could destroy the clearing and strike examinees hidden beyond his view. The battlefield now carried clear traces of beast transformation, Black Sun Rose cloth, sealing energy, and a completely different sword-based killing method. That evidence later convinced investigators that more than one unregistered expert had fought the attackers in the same region. Gu remembered the sealing technique carefully, deciding that an ability capable of removing active skills would be extremely valuable if he could obtain it later. The three-headed nightmare wolf still cowered nearby after witnessing both the transformed leader and Gu's sword formation. Gu finished the boss, collected the examination points, and moved on before Soul Guard teams reached the clearing. Captain Ning's unit arrived roughly minutes later and identified the sword victim as a wanted mid-ranking Black Sun Rose member. Even Ning admitted she would not have been confident defeating him alone, which made the unexplained sword wounds even more alarming to investigators. The charred bodies matched lightning damage found elsewhere, while the leader's countless fine cuts clearly came from a separate combat method. Investigators therefore concluded that a lightning specialist and an unknown sword expert had both operated inside the dungeon during the attack. That mistaken theory protected Gu, because Ning had seen him use lightning, but never witnessed the Azure Lotus Sword's formation. In her mind, one student already paying some imagined cost for forbidden lightning could not possibly be the second expert as well. After the leader died, Soul Guard and city military teams gradually eliminated remaining attackers and began evacuating examinees in controlled groups. Yuk left only when the emergency extraction reached his region, and the examination could no longer continue normally. Medical staff first scanned returning students for contamination from beast transformation before removing transport restrictions from their tracking bands. Gu's results were completely normal, and his equipment showed almost no visible damage, compared with students carried out on stretchers. Outside, the examination plaza had become chaos, with parents crowded behind security lines and teachers repeatedly checking lists of missing students. Gu's homeroom teacher ran to him first, checking his arms, shoulders, torso, and armor for wounds he might be hiding. Only after confirming he was genuinely uninjured did she begin talking about the makeup examinations expected after the attack. Gu refused because he had already accumulated enough points for the university target he had chosen before entering. His teacher initially thought fear had made him abandon the exam, since most students stopped earning points once the invasion began. She had every reason to doubt him, because a newly awakened F-tier Taoist would normally struggle to earn even a small fraction of Funyun's requirement. Gu showed that the tracking band had recorded his score, forcing the teacher to replace concern with a completely different kind of disbelief. The result could not be accepted instantly because emergency conditions created too many opportunities for duplicate kills, corrupted records, or accidental scoring errors. Examination staff therefore began a full audit of timestamps, monster disappearances, tracking logs, and the exact identities attached to every recorded point. Gu remained calm because none of his monster kills depended on cheating, outside interference, or attacks performed by someone else's party. Even when the Nether Emperor had helped elsewhere, the examination score Gu claimed came from targets the system attributed correctly under the test rules. Officials also knew that fabricating the result would require manipulating the dungeon core, tracking bans and surveillance at the same time. Anyone capable of that level of system intrusion would gain almost nothing from manufacturing one university admission score for an orphaned F-tier student. The attack had killed students and wounded many more. So survivors who lacked enough points would receive another chance through a formal makeup examination. Gu did not need it, leaving the ruined plaza with his university threshold already secured, despite the most dangerous examination in recent memory. More importantly, Black Sun Rose had moved from rumor to a confirmed enemy connected, indirectly, to Xiaowing's actions before the test. Gu's school life was ending, but the people hunting him had just proven they could turn a national examination into a battlefield. The verification team did not accept Gu's 800 points by simply reading the band, because the emergency made every unusual result worth auditing carefully. Technicians compared kill timestamps with monster disappearance records, checked repeated targets, inspected the band core, and searched for any sign of external tampering. Every three-headed nightmare wolf, ordinary monster, and recorded battle aligned with the dungeon data, leaving no technical reason to reject Gu's score. One verifier paused before confirming it, then asked a second technician to repeat the entire check, because the number exceeded every result at the site. The second audit returned the same answer, so the examination display finally listed Gu at 800 points with no detected violation. His homeroom teacher froze because the student she expected to struggle toward 100 points had surpassed many previous first-place results in benching. Other students and university representatives turned toward Gu at once, unable to reconcile an F-tier Taoist with the highest verified score around them. The display could not explain how he earned those points, but it proved that all 800 had been credited legitimately to his band. Gu refused to reveal his combat details publicly because Black Sun Rose had already infiltrated the examination and could still be collecting information nearby. Publishing the score was unavoidable once verification finished, but publishing Divine Lightning, the Nether Emperor, and Transcendent equipment would only help future enemies prepare. Some students accused the band of malfunctioning until officials explained that tampering would trigger alarms and permanent disqualification from the national examination. The argument then shifted towards special equipment, yet legal gear was allowed, as long as Gu personally earned the kills recorded under his identity. What the rules actually banned were paid carrying, external kills, and manipulation of examination systems, none of which appeared anywhere in Gu's verified record. University representatives immediately surrounded him because the window before a preliminary agreement was their last chance to recruit the highest scorer at the site. One school offered free tuition, another promised student council access, and Moon Lake University added a private dormitory, plus a large annual scholarship. Competing offers climbed from 100,000 yuan towards several hundred thousand, turning the damaged examination plaza into an aggressive recruitment floor. Gu signed nothing during the excitement because scholarships solved living expenses, not the upper limit of his growth over the next 4 years. His system could evolve combat tools, but it could not create experienced professors, high-tier dungeon intelligence, or specialized university resources from nothing. Funyun University therefore remained his target, despite richer short-term offers from schools desperate to secure the local examination sensation. Xiaowing pushed through the crowd before Gu could leave and loudly accused him of cheating, hoping repetition might turn public suspicion back against him. Gu noticed immediately that Xiaowing looked frightened rather than merely jealous, with pale skin and rushed breathing unlike his usual arrogant performance. Xiaoying had scored only a little above 200, yet family connections already gave him a path toward Funian, so admissions competition alone did not explain the panic. Examination staff repeated that the tracking band showed no anomaly and that defeating official safeguards would require technology far beyond anything useful for one student's score. Gu ignored the accusation and grabbed Xiaoying's arm. Instead, noticing abnormal heat and traces suggesting something had recently been removed or suppressed there. The black and red cloth visible before the examination was gone, and a fresh scratch had damaged the exact pixel section, where a suspicious mark might remain. Black residue still clung to the damaged edge, making the cleanup look deliberate rather than like random combat wear from surviving the dungeon attack. Gu asked directly about Black Sun Rose and the missing marker, causing Xiaoying's eyes to shift before he denied ever hearing the organization's name. The Sasnile sounded worse because a genuinely confused student would first ask why the terrorist group was connected to him, instead of instantly threatening a defamation lawsuit. Gu lacked legal proof, so he released Xiaoying rather than force a search that could let the family portray him as the aggressor. He warned that anyone gambling with Black Sun Rose would eventually lose far more than an examination result, then watched Xiaoying retreat toward his father. Xiao Wangshu outwardly scolded his son, but kept one hand near the damaged armor, never asking why Gu mentioned Black Sun Rose at all. Father and son avoided the subject almost identically, giving Gu another behavioral clue, even though neither reaction could serve as formal evidence. The Soul Guard Bureau already had jurisdiction over the attack, so Gu chose not to turn the examination plaza into his own interrogation scene. Admissions representatives resumed their offers, but Gu declined them politely and repeated that Fuqing University remained his first choice, despite the money being offered. Most schools backed away once they understood. He valued long-term training and high-level resources more than a larger scholarship package. Fuqiang's admissions representative had stayed calm throughout the bidding, which made Gu briefly wonder whether the university considered his result insufficient. The man finally introduced himself as Director Fu and described Gu's overall performance as merely acceptable for preliminary consideration. That restrained reaction impressed Gu more than exaggerated praise, because Fuqiang saw elite candidates every year and had no reason to abandon standards for local fame. 800 points earned Gu access to stricter screening, not automatic enrollment, proving the university cared about future performance more than one spectacular test. Director Fu handed him a letter allowing direct participation in the new student trial 2 months later, and warned that failure there would still mean rejection. He reviewed Gu's academic record, awakening date, and family background, pausing only after seeing that the Taoist class had been fused less than a month earlier. Even then, Director Fu did not demand explanations about divine lightning or private skills in public, preserving the boundary between evaluation and personal trump cards. The letter carried a single-use mental imprint tied to Gu, preventing another person from using his invitation if it was lost or stolen. Director Fu emphasized that the next 2 months were preparation time rather than vacation, since future students remained responsible for their own progress and survival. Gu liked that condition because he never wanted one examination score to carry him through 4 years, while his actual ability stopped improving. Before leaving, Director Fu quietly warned that Black Sun Rose might already consider Gu a target, and advised caution until university security could cover him. The warning matched Gu's own conclusion because he had killed multiple infiltrators and emerged with the examination's only qualifying result during the attack. Whether the organization knew his exact skills or not, a visible survivor with 800 points would be impossible for them to ignore completely. The examination ended with casualties registered, makeup opportunities prepared for survivors, and the damaged shun sealed until authorities completed a full investigation. Gu kept his existing score, while other examinees could either preserve theirs or sit the makeup examination later, once security conditions improved. Investigators eventually uncovered that Xiao Wangsu's relationship with Black Sun Rose had begun years earlier, when the organization helped him rise from a marginal family branch. The Xiao family's later wealth depended on secret funding, territory, and class-holder resources that came with obligations they could no longer simply refuse. In exchange, the family concealed identities, collected information on promising young class holders, and provided legitimate cover for people operating inside benching. Their relationship was therefore not one illegal transaction, but a long chain of mutual interests, strong enough to bind the next generation as well. Xiaoying wanted his father to sever contact after the examination disaster, but Xiao Wangsuf refused and prepared to introduce him to the local branch instead. The organization treated young heirs as both rewards and hostages, ensuring families that benefited from Black's son Rose could not easily walk away later. Gu's danger, therefore, did not disappear when the examination ended, because future attacks could move from monitored dungeons into ordinary daily life. Black's son Rose became quiet for several days, but Gu interpreted the silence as repositioning, rather than evidence that the threat had vanished. His system kept delivering daily evolution points meanwhile, gradually rebuilding the small portion of the original 10 billion he had already spent. With the examination finished, Gu decided the Epic Sunset set no longer offered enough protections against enemies willing to attack him outside official rules. He planned to evolve all three pieces together, so the set effect would remain intact instead of breaking after only one component changed quality. The system processed each item separately, displaying the material conditions, cost, and final form, before Gu confirmed any part of the transformation. The Sunset Headband evolved into a transcendent Starfall battle helm, with enormous health and spirit bonuses far beyond its original epic statistics. The long robe became Starfall Emperor armor, adding another huge health increase, along with strength that further reduced Gu's old caster weakness. The battle boots became Starfall Gold Thread boots, expanding mana and agility, while preserving compatibility with the other evolved pieces. Together, the three pieces granted a massive set bonus and unlocked Might of Starfall, a passive connected to the stars of the Big Dipper. The set could unlock more star effects as Gu leveled, but only one available star activated at a time, and the selection changed automatically each day. At his current level, only Greedy Wolf and Fortune Preserver were available, creating two very different possible battle styles. Greedy Wolf multiplied Gu's final attack and skill damage by 100. While Fortune Preserver multiplied health and mana recovery instead. Gu tried switching stars manually and failed, confirming that the random daily selection could not be reset through equip changes, mana use, or dungeon entry. That limitation forced him to adapt strategy around the day's star, rather than simply choosing whichever effect made a particular battle easiest. The current selection was Greedy Wolf, which meant his already overwhelming Divine Lightning received another 100-fold multiplier after normal calculations finished. Immortal Radiance amplified the equipment statistics first, while Greedy Wolf acted later on final attack results, making the interaction much stronger than simple addition. Equipping the full set briefly produced an illusion of deep space behind Gu, as the Big Dipper stars appeared one after another. Deep blue armor with gold patterns replaced the Sunset set's darker red appearance, though the starlight could precede enough to avoid advertising its true quality constantly. Gu planned to cover the distinctive patterns with an ordinary robe whenever possible, and reveal the full appearance only when combat actually demanded it. The evolved set pushed his health, mana, strength, agility, and spirit into ranges that ordinary observers would never associate with an F-tier Taoist. His three major attributes now stood around tens of millions after equipment, universe fragment bonuses, weapon effects, and earlier permanent evolution all combined. Greedy Wolf did not appear directly inside those attribute numbers, because it multiplied final damage instead of altering the visible base statistics. Anyone reading only Gu's panel would therefore underestimate his real output, even if they somehow saw the already absurd values underneath the equipment. The entire set's evolution consumed only a tiny fraction of the original reserve, leaving Gu with nearly 10 billion evolution points still available. He could continue evolving skills and equipment, but the growing power made safe testing much harder than simply finding enough points to spend. The Nether Emperor also became stronger because Gu's new attributes increased the summon scaling automatically without any separate evolution cost. Combined with Greedy Wolf on Gu's personal skills, theoretical damage reached a range where ordinary dungeon bosses stopped being useful measurement targets. Gu estimated that a serious Divine Lightning strike could approach trillions, making accidental environmental destruction more worrying than whether the target would survive. Testing on random content would destroy monsters, drops, and possibly the dungeon itself before Gu learned anything meaningful about the new set. He needed a stable high-difficulty environment, with enough enemies and durability to observe the star effect without causing damage in the real world. Chengyu called during that planning, praised the examination result at length, and immediately asked when Gu planned to enter another serious dungeon. The young heir's priorities had changed since their first meeting, because following Gu repeatedly produced more growth than showing off family resources ever had. Gu learned that Chu Tianming had also arranged to attend Funyuan University after their dungeon experiences altered his original university plans. Both heirs now had reasons to keep training with Gu, though their families still prepared expensive life-saving items for every dangerous mission. Lu Jinglin assigned a high-level healer to support future operations, someone capable of restoring hundreds of health every second under normal conditions. Gu appreciated the resource but remained cautious about adding unfamiliar people, since one wrong movement inside Divine Lightning's range could become fatal instantly. The Nether Emperor created a similar problem, because new teammates might not understand which directions were safe once the summon received a broad clearing order. Rather than build a large party, Gu preferred a small group whose behavior, emergency items, and combat habits he already understood well. That approach also reduced the number of people who could connect his visible class to abilities that should never exist on an F-tier Taoist. He began researching mandatory mission dungeons, looking for one difficult enough to survive his new damage, without being so unstable that rewards became impossible to recover. The search led toward content above difficulty 50, where return scrolls no longer guaranteed escape once a mission officially began. Zhu warned Chengyu and Chu Tianming that entering would mean accepting the possibility of being trapped until the scenario itself was completed. Both heirs agreed anyway, turning the next dungeon from another training run into the first mission, where all three knowingly placed their lives behind Gu's command. Gu spent the quiet days after the examination, learning to control his expanded agility and strength without turning ordinary rooms into accidental training casualties. Greedy Wolf created a new discipline problem, because knowing how hard he could hit mattered less than knowing how little force a situation actually required. Chengyu called the next dungeon trip training, but his carefully arranged route, supplies, and support team made the plan look suspiciously comfortable. Gu agreed to go only if he chose the difficulty, because effortless low-level farming would raise numbers without teaching either heir how to survive real danger. A convoy of expensive cars arrived beneath Gu's apartment, with Chengyu and Chu Tianming immediately competing over who could serve him more enthusiastically. Their family bodyguards ignored the ridiculous argument because both young masters had learned that Gu's combat orders mattered more than their usual status games. Chengyu had prepared a healer, priest, scout, and supply specialists, forming a conventional party that most class holders would have considered extremely secure. The healer alone could restore roughly 500 health every second, enough to stabilize ordinary fighters below level 50 during most sustained battles. Gu's natural recovery already exceeded that amount, while his current health pool made the support specialist almost irrelevant to his own survival. More importantly, every extra party member became another person Gu had to protect from Divine Lightning, the Nether Emperor, or mandatory mission mechanics. He dismissed the support team politely and told Chengyu to pay everyone as promised, because being unnecessary did not mean those professionals had done anything wrong. Chengyu obeyed immediately, showing more maturity than during their first meeting, when family status had mattered to him far more than dungeon discipline. Chu Tianming responded by promising an even better healer next time, completely missing Gu's point that raw healing numbers were not the real issue. Gu let the two argue until he threatened to send them into separate dungeons, after which both finally focused on equipment and mission preparation. The entrance plaza parted around the trio, because Gu's 800-point examination result had already spread throughout benching. Rumors claimed Funyuan had trained him secretly, while others blamed the Chung and Chu families for testing impossible equipment onto one mysterious student. Gu preferred the confusion because false explanations made it harder for outsiders to identify the evolution system as the true source of his progression. Chengyu suggested difficulty 31. Chu Tianming proposed the 40s, and Gu rejected both because neither could properly test the Starfall set. He selected at least difficulty 50, where dungeon rules changed dramatically, and enemies began behaving like organized forces, rather than predictable respawning monsters. Below that threshold, escape items usually remained useful, Above it, mandatory missions could lock every class holder inside until the storyline itself reached completion. Enemies could scout, retreat, surround, and adapt to party composition, making tactical intelligence more dangerous than another simple increase in health or damage. Gu admitted that alone he might have tried something even harder, but difficulty 50 gave both heirs a reasonable chance to survive their first mandatory mission. Before entry, he made them review every life-saving item, because family treasures were useless if nobody remembered how or when to activate them. Cheng Yu carried a death substitution resource, while Chu Tianming had emergency barriers and high-grade medicine prepared by the Chu family. Gu also ordered them never to leave his perception range or chase a retreating enemy without permission, regardless of how weak the target appeared. The selected vortex contained a difficulty 50 scenario called Demonic Army, destroys a nation, with one objective: repel the invasion and preserve the kingdom. A final warning stated that nobody could leave after the mission began, forcing all 3 members to confirm the risk separately before transportation. The description gave no duration, army size, or exact definition of preserving the kingdom, leaving several dangerous failure conditions completely unclear. Protecting only the palace might still count as failure if every citizen, city, and piece of territory disappeared before the demons withdrew. Gu read those uncertainties aloud and gave both heirs one final chance to wait outside instead of trusting him blindly. Competition kept Cheng Yu and Chu Tianming from retreating first, but their real confidence came from Gu never abandoning them in previous dungeons. The 3 formed a party with Gu as captain, contribution-based experience, and strict obedience rules for retreat, concealment, and battlefield movement. Unknown to them, Xiaoying watched from the crowd beside Black Sun Rose members recently introduced through his father's criminal connections. Desperate to kill Gu, Xiaoying offered part of his family's own business interests because a direct cash payment would create easier evidence. The attackers raised their price immediately before entry, and Xiaoying accepted despite knowing that the deal weakened the foundation his father had built. They entered separately, without visible Black Sun Rose markers, disguising themselves as ordinary adventurers before the dungeon entrance closed behind them. Gu's party arrived in a southern region, already shattered by war, where burned homes and broken walls showed the demonic army had passed recently. Gray clouds covered the sky, distant horns sounded from multiple roads, and black columns of troops moved steadily toward the north. The mission had not placed them safely inside the capital, meaning they first had to cross occupied territory before learning whether the kingdom still had leadership. If the capital fell before they reached it, Gu could not assume killing scattered southern squads afterward would repair the mission's failure condition. Chu Tianming spotted a family fleeing along the road, while several black armored soldiers pursued them from the ruined settlement behind. The enemies were heavenly demon soldiers around level 52. Each carrying statistics that could depth ordinary city neighborhoods on Blue Star. Demonic intimidation attacked weaker spirits while Bloodblade soul theft drained life through wounds, giving even basic soldiers dangerous combined control and damage. Gu told Cheng Yu and Chu Tianming to hide and follow slowly, then moved ahead so the fleeing civilians would not remain inside the battle zone. The demons mocked the lone young Taoist and spread into an encirclement, using mental pressure first, while blood-red blades approached from several angles. Gu's spirit stood so far above theirs that the intimidation produced no meaningful sensation and did not even deserve a system warning. He walked farther from the civilians before revealing the Starfall set, refusing to let residual force from an easy fight kill people he meant to save. The armor unfolded a brief illusion of the Big Dipper, and the greedy wolf star shone brightest across the deep blue and gold equipment. Even the demons sensed danger, but faction orders forced them to continue their attack, despite instincts telling them to retreat. Goose decided they were not worth testing 8 trillion damage and summoned the Nether Emperor at ordinary human size beside him. One sweep stopped every incoming blade. Then purple power traveled backward through the weapons. Before the soldiers could release their grips, all 12 demons died together, each awarding experience and increasing a mission counter that immediately revealed the scenario's terrifying scale. The required total was not thousands or millions, but roughly 2 billion enemy kills, unless the demonic army withdrew by some other condition. Gu checked the number twice, because even an enemy dying every second would make the mission last longer than an ordinary human lifetime. His Divine lightning could kill huge groups, but selecting targets individually would still waste time against an army measured in billions. Vermilion bird-style area attacks risked burning the already ruined kingdom, while the Nether Emperor offered much better control across enormous battlefields. The rescued family knelt and treated Gu like a divine savior, forcing him to stop them before asking practical questions about the capital and enemy concentration. Cheng Yu and Chu Tianming finally caught up, but their attention immediately shifted from the civilians toward the unfamiliar starfall patterns across Gu's armor. Gu slapped Cheng Yu's curious hand away and pointed toward the mission counter, reminding both heirs that 2 billion demons mattered more than equipment quality. Their confidence had become almost excessive, with both insisting another 2 billion enemies would only be an appetizer, as long as Gu remained present. That trust created its own danger, because repeated easy victories had taught them to expect Gu to solve every crisis before they personally faced consequences. Gu decided future battles needed clear survival responsibilities, so loyalty would not turn into carelessness around enemies strong enough to kill them instantly. The rescued civilians knew little military information, but confirmed that remaining resistance centered around the northern capital, where the demonic army was concentrating its forces. Gu concluded, the king and palace were the best available sources for enemy numbers, territory status, civilian survival, and exact mission failure conditions. He switched into the cloud-chasing boots, grabbed one companion with each hand, and prepared a direct movement jump toward the capital. Before traveling, Gu used the family's directions to identify true north and that selected a same inside the palace instead of teleporting blindly inside. The boots crossed distance without checking whether the destination contained traps, formations, walls, or enemies, so safe arrival depended entirely on Gu's own judgment. Cheng Yu and Chu Tianming experienced the movement ability for the first time and nearly vomited the moment their feet touched solid ground. Their argument over who served Gu better disappeared temporarily as both leaned against the palace wall, trying to recover from the violent spatial transition. Inside the Great Hall, the kingdom's ruler sat exhausted among wounded generals, with dust-covering robes that had once represented absolute royal authority. Fewer than 1,000 guards remained from an army of roughly 100,000. While black markers covered most cities on the strategic map, the capital stood on the edge of collapse, and every ceremonial servant had already disappeared, leaving only military personnel around the remaining command table. Zhu asked for enemy troop locations, civilian concentrations, defensive lines, and the condition under which the kingdom would officially be considered destroyed. He cared less about royal ceremony than identifying what the dungeon's mission system might treat as an irreversible failure. The king confirmed that preserving the capital and surviving population mattered, while scattered armies outside were already too weak to counterattack independently. Gu ordered the remaining soldiers to withdraw toward defensive and civilian duties, instead of throwing themselves into direct battle against millions of demons. That decision also reduced friendly fire risk, because the Nether Emperor's attacks could cover areas no ordinary royal soldier would survive standing near. Cheng Yu and Chu Tianming stayed inside the palace to protect the king, giving them a useful role without placing them beneath Gu's widest attacks. Outside the walls, the demonic army covered the horizon so densely that normal class holders could have fought for years without clearing the visible numbers. Gu revealed the Nether Emperor openly because secrecy no longer mattered inside a sealed scenario where the kingdom would die without immediate overwhelming force. Purple power swept through the first formations, and the mission system counted every demon separately, even when one attack destroyed hundreds at the same time. Experience flooded Gu continuously, while Cheng Yu and Chu Tianming received party shares from the safety of the palace command center. Every new level raised Gu's base statistics, which strengthened the Nether Emperor again, and increased the speed of each later battlefield sweep. The mission counter moved rapidly in raw numbers, but barely changed as a percentage because 2 billion remained an almost absurd denominator. Gu stopped thinking like a dungeon farmer and began dividing the battlefield into routes, treating the invasion as a logistical problem instead of one giant target. He assigned separate regions to Divine Lightning and the Nether Emperor, so neither power wasted times, destroying areas the other had already cleared. The royal soldiers focused on evacuations, fortifications, wounded civilians, and information, allowing Gu's overwhelming combat power to operate without unnecessary friendly casualties. This division of labor made the palace useful rather than symbolic. Since commanders could identify population centers, Gu needed to avoid while pursuing enemy concentrations. Chengyu and Chu Tianming watched levels rise through shared experience, but understood that leaving the hall without permission would only create another protection problem. Gu's own progression accelerated as millions of enemies became a resource stream far larger than anything available in ordinary dungeons around benching. The scenario finally provided the durable scale he wanted for Greedy Wolf. Yet, ordinary soldiers still died too quickly to reveal the multiplier's actual upper limit. Even so, Gu learned how much control the Starfall set demanded, because one careless full-output strike could erase territory the mission required him to preserve. He used reduced attacks whenever possible, reserving the largest area effects for distant formations where civilians and royal forces had already withdrawn. The Nether Emperor needed similar direction because a literal order to kill every demon could send him through co-populated areas without considering collateral damage. Gu therefore specified routes, boundaries, and priorities, turning the intelligent summon into a strategic weapon instead of an uncontrolled moving disaster. Reports from surviving scouts showed entire demonic columns disappearing before commanders could understand what kind of forces had entered the war. Enemy leadership initially treated the destruction as a temporary magical attack, then changed deployment once several different armies vanished almost simultaneously. That reaction confirmed the difficulty 50 dungeon truly adapted, because the demons began redistributing troops instead of continuing along fixed scripted paths. Gu welcomed the change because defeating intelligent opposition would teach him more than another boss standing still beneath impossible damage. Somewhere beyond the capital, the demonic command structure finally recognized that one newly arrived class holder had become the central obstacle to conquering the kingdom. The king initially distrusted Gu's request to pull exhausted soldiers inward, because 3 strangers demanding fewer defenses sounded dangerously close to an enemy trick. Several generals even drew their swords after hearing the proposal, unable to verify Gu's identity, authority, or claim that the coming battle no longer required them. Did not blame the suspicion, since a ruler whose country had collapsed into one capital could not gamble everything on an unexplained promise. Instead of arguing, he left Chengyu and Chu Tianming inside the Great Hall and walked toward the palace gates to prove his sincerity through results. The king allowed him through because witnessing the source of Gu's confidence offered more information than another debate between frightened survivors and mysterious newcomers. Outside, the demonic army surrounded the capital like a black ocean, with shields, archers, giant apes, and reserves, coordinated by constant signal horns. 3 sections of wall had already been breached, while wounded defenders kept firing from positions where they were too exhausted to evacuate themselves. Gu first ordered nearby soldiers behind the towers, so the Nether Emperor could attack outside necessity without cutting through allies standing along the wall. Boundary control mattered more than damage, because the summon already possessed enough force to erase enemies far beyond anything the remaining guards could survive nearby. Gu climbed the wall, ignored soldiers urging the apparent civilian to retreat, and revealed the Nether Emperor in full view of both armies. His order was simple, but carefully limited by direction. Eliminate the Heavenly Demon Army outside the capital, and leave no hostile soldier alive there. Purple light crossed the battlefield, opening a gap through the siege line before the nearest demonic commander understood what kind of enemy had appeared. The first sweep followed the outer wall and erased shield troops already pressing the gates, relieving the defenders without striking damaged structures behind them. A second pistol traced the incoming arrow path and destroyed archers together with the giant apes hurling stones from the middle formations. Demon commanders split their forces among separate gates, hoping to force the Nether Emperor into long travel between attacks and create openings elsewhere. The plan failed because his movement was so fast that one afterimage remained visible, even after another formation had already been destroyed. Every target touched by the purple light received the same overwhelming damage, so no wounded survivors remained to slow later passes or require finishing strikes. The mission counter climbed from hundreds into thousands, then hundreds of thousands, as individual demons continued registering separately under one enormous attack pattern. Gu's disabled constant experience messages because the flood of notifications began blocking his view of the battlefield, while the summon kept accelerating. Within minutes, millions of enemies had died. Yet the progress bar still showed how insignificant that number remained beside the mission's 2 billion requirement. Gu's level rose repeatedly through the 50s, with the system collapsing intermediate notifications while still applying every attribute increase correctly. Chengyu and Chu Tianming gained party experience from the palace as well, though Gu received the largest share because his summon performed the actual clearing. Reaching level 60 unlocked another starfall possibility, called Giant Gate, which could summon astral spirits whose power scaled from Gu's own attributes. Every 100 spirit allowed another astral spirit, meaning Gu's enormous spirit could theoretically produce well over 100,000 independent fighters. Each spirit shared Gu's level and attacked using a multiple of his total attributes, making quantity the defining advantage rather than one overwhelmingly powerful body. Giant Gate did not replace Greedy Wolf immediately, because Starfall changed stars only during the fixed daily update, not whenever a new option unlocked. Gaffa realized that if Giant Gate appeared later, an army of astral spirits could solve the mission's enormous target count far more efficiently. For now, the Nether Emperor kept tearing through siege formations until demonic commanders finally ordered a full retreat from the capital. The enemy strategist had recognized that continuing the same formation would only feed more troops into a weapon they still did not understand. Later captured records showed that the demons planned to investigate Gu's range, prepare counters, and return before their own festival deadline. Defenders knew only that the horns changed, reinforcements stopped, and the black tide suddenly began withdrawing from every side of the capital. Soldiers cheered and knelt, while some treated the Nether Emperor as a divine general and the starfall illusion around Gu as a heavenly omen. Gu ordered them to stop kneeling, treat the wounded, repair water supplies, and reinforce broken gates because the mission remained nowhere near complete. The king personally bowed after seeing the siege collapse, but Gu immediately explained that only a few million of roughly 2 billion enemies had died. That scale finally convinced the ruler that preserving exhausted soldiers for reconstruction mattered more than sacrificing them for symbolic resistance on the walls. He ordered combat-capable survivors onto rotating inner-city duty, while others rested, repaired granaries, restored water access, and protected civilians from scattered threats. Gu's objective was destroying the invasion, while the king's responsibility was making sure a functioning kingdom still existed once the killing finally stopped. That evening, the palace held a modest feast using rationed stores, and Cheng Yu and Chu Tianming enjoyed being treated like immortals despite barely fighting. Gu interrupted their celebrations with simple arithmetic. At only a few million kills per day, the mission could last for years inside the sealed dungeon. Waiting defensively also gave the intelligent enemy time to scatter, hide, attack civilians indirectly, and design counters against the Nether Emperor's visible abilities. Gu therefore proposed striking the demonic headquarters before the next organized assault could begin, forcing the command structure to react on his terms. The king feared losing the one person capable of saving the capital, but Gu argued that surrendering initiative would create a different kind of risk. A future assault could ignore the walls and target food, water, civilians, or separate cities, turning endless defense into a guaranteed slow failure. The king offered troops for the counterattack, yet Gu refused because ordinary soldiers could not match his movement speed and would become casualties he had to protect. Cheng Yu and Chu Tianming wanted to follow, but Gu assigned them to defend the palace and contact him if surviving demon units attacked unexpectedly. Keeping them with the mission's political center gave both heirs a real responsibility, while preventing them from slowing a deep assault through enemy territory. After midnight, the system added another 100,000 evolution points, and Starfall finally changed from Greedy Wolf to Fortune Preserver. The new star removed the 100-fold final damage multiplier, but multiplied Gu's health and mana recovery so dramatically that endurance became almost limitless. Against billions of enemies, Gu preferred sustained recovery over greater burst damage because his normal attacks already exceeded what ordinary demon soldiers could survive. The starfall patterns shifted from sharp offensive radiance toward a calmer cyan glow, visually confirming that a different constellation effect now governed the set. Gu tested a low-cost skill and watched the lost mana return almost immediately, matching the system's promised 100-fold recovery calculation. His recovery rate now exceeded the size of his own health and mana pools, meaning any non-lethal damage could disappear almost as soon as it landed. Gu still refused to call that immortality, because one instant kill, ceiling effect, controllability, or direct erasure could prevent recovery from operating at all. He kept the Nether Emperor close, maintained defensive equipment, and treated Fortune Preserver as endurance insurance, rather than permission to ignore battlefield mechanics. Gu left the capital alone after midnight, following wagon ruts and demonic energy from the retreating force toward the enemy's enormous headquarters. The cloud-chasing boots carried him across ruined territory, while the Nether Emperor traveled concealed in purple light until endless campfires appeared on the horizon. The enemy camp was not one compact base but layered guard posts, supply areas, wounded sections, weapon stores, and a command zone buried far inside. Blood-red command runes floated above the black mist, making the full headquarters look more like a moving nation than a temporary military camp. Gu made no attempt to hide his aura, because an open approach was meant to draw out leaders instead of forcing him to search billions of soldiers individually. If commanders came toward him, the Nether Emperor could clear outward from the center, while Gu gathered information on how the army actually organized itself. A scout reported that only one human was approaching, prompting the Heavenly Demon strategist to respond personally instead of ordering an immediate mass attack. The strategist surrounded the meeting area with archers and heavy troops, while using conversation to study Gu and quietly complete the encirclement. Captured records later proved he already suspected that a high-tier summoner had caused the capital losses and wanted to identify the person controlling it. His status showed a level around 60, high intelligence, strong physical attributes, miraculous recovery, soul-seizing eyes, and several abilities built around control. The strategist offered Gu survival, treasure, and prisoners if he betrayed the kingdom and opened the capital for the demons to massacre everyone inside. The proposal sounded like recruitment, but Gu recognized that the conversation mainly bought time for hidden ranged attackers to finish positioning around him. He refused without bargaining because the mission required saving the kingdom, while the demonic factions is specifically to destroy it. Gu summoned the Nether Emperor in front of the strategist and ordered him to clear the camp completely, instead of allowing another minute of preparation. Purple light formed a killing circle around the command area first, removing elite troops that might interfere before the summon entered the densest formations. Demonic signals changed from attack to reinforcement, then retreat, but no order could move quickly enough to escape the Emperor's speed. Tens of millions died as the summon crossed one section after another, with each kill reducing the mission counter. While experience continued pouring into Gu, the strategist realized the scale of the disaster and switched from negotiation to a direct plan for killing the summoner's master. His reasoning was correct under normal class rules, because most summoned creatures disappear or lose control when the contract holder dies. Soul-seizing eyes targeted Gu's mind first, attempting to create a brief opening, while the strategists rushed through the fire-lit command area. The mental attack failed against Gu's vastly stronger spirit, leaving the enemy without the distraction he expected before entering close combat range. Gu deliberately waited until the strategist came closer, because killing him instantly would waste an opportunity to test hidden abilities and gather command information. A small palm thunder attack met him instead of divine lightning, giving Gu enough control to observe how miraculous recovery responded without erasing the target. The strategist survived the first controlled hit and immediately tried to exploit what he believed was Gu's vulnerable recovery window. Fortune Preserver restored Gu's minor resource loss almost instantly, while the enemy's own healing operated far too slowly to change the difference between them. Gu confirmed that the strategist's strongest advantage was knowledge and control rather than raw durability, making him more useful alive than most frontline officers. The Nether Emperor, meanwhile, continued annihilating troops across the surrounding camp, forcing the strategist to watch his entire command structure disappear during the duel. Gu questioned him about army size, leadership, routes, reinforcements, and the conditions that might cause the demonic faction to retreat from the kingdom entirely. The answers revealed that powerful generals still commanded distant forces, and that destroying one strategist would not automatically end the mandatory mission. Gu therefore shifted from a simple decapitation plan towards systematic clearing, using the enemy's own command information to prioritize the largest surviving formations. Once the strategist stopped providing useful information, Gu ended the fight and allowed the mission counter to continue updating beneath the Nether Emperor's broader assault. The camp's destruction produced so many simultaneous experience gains that Gu's level kept climbing, while the battlefield itself became difficult to recognize. Entire weapon areas, supply lines, and troop formations vanished without Gu needing to destroy useful civilian structures or the kingdom's remaining territory. The deeper Gu pushed, the more the scenario proved that mandatory missions rewarded strategic control rather than simply presenting one oversized boss at the end. Enemy commanders began dividing forces across distant regions, hoping dispersion would prevent one summon from clearing enough numbers to finish the mission quickly. Ju answered by using speed, route information, and separate attack directions, instead of chasing whichever group happened to remain closest. The Nether Emperor received one region while Gu used controlled divine lightning elsewhere, reducing overlap and turning the entire invasion map into parallel clearing zones. Fortune Preserver made sustained casting practical because mana returned faster than ordinary enemies could force Gu to spend it across repeated attacks. Cheng Yu and Chu Tianming remained at the palace, receiving enough shared experience to approach levels their families would have considered impossible before meeting Gu. Through the party channel, they reported that scattered demons tried probing the capital but could no longer form a serious siege under the collapsing command structure. The king's rested soldiers handled those smaller attacks, proving Gu's earlier decision to preserve them had created practical value beyond simple compassion. Gu continued the deep assault through the night, choosing targets based on mission impact rather than chasing every isolated enemy individually. The surviving demonic leadership finally understood that hiding ordinary soldiers would only delay the outcome, while their strongest commanders remained exposed to targeted attacks. That pressure began drawing higher-level generals into the open, giving Gu the durable opponents he originally wanted when selecting difficulty 50. One of those generals carried enough offensive power to make Gu curious whether Starfall Emperor armor could finally be tested against a direct serious strike. Instead of dodging the approaching commander, Gu prepared to measure the exact difference between a level 70+ enemy attack and his evolved defenses. The Heavenly Demon General emerged around level 79 with enormous health, high physical attributes, Twin Soul Rebirth, and a surge ability capable of strengthening his second phase. Gu deliberately left the Nether Emperor, clearing ordinary troops because this commander offered a rare chance to test Fortune Preserver and Starfall Emperor armor under direct pressure. He did not stand still recklessly. Purple protection remained around his body, and the Azure Lotus sword could activate immediately if the general revealed an unexpected killing mechanic. After confirming the panel contained no instant death, ceiling, or percentage-based health attack, Gub allowed the first serious saber strike to land on purpose. Attribute Surge strengthened the general before impact, raising his combat statistics sharply, while death energy gathered along the weapon for a concentrated finishing technique. The blade failed to penetrate Starfall Emperor armor, but transmitted enough force through the protection to reduce Gu's enormous health bar to a narrow sliver. The experiment came dangerously close to failure, because only a modest increase in the general's final damage would have exceeded Gu's maximum health completely. Before the enemy's second slash arrived, Fortune Preserver restored every missing point and returned Gu to full health almost instantly. The healing number greatly exceeded the missing amount, but excess recovery created no shield, confirming that the star restored life, rather than increasing maximum durability. Gu therefore remained vulnerable to true one-hit damage, even though any survivable attack could be erased before an opponent completed the next normal strike. The general mistook the recovery for a consumable item with limited charges and attacked faster, believing repeated blows would exhaust the mysterious resource. Gu had already learned what he needed, so he stopped accepting strikes and met the next saber with controlled divine lightning. The blast destroyed the weapon and killed the general's first body, but no final experience notification appeared, because Twin Soul Rebirth activated immediately. Black Soulfire escaped the corpse and reconstructed another body, confirming the boss-style commander truly possessed a second life, rather than simple regeneration. The reborn form did not recover the shattered weapon or regain attribute surge, showing that resurrection preserved life without undoing every disadvantage created before death. Ended the second phase with another lightning strike, finally receiving the kill notification and confirming Twin Soul Rebirth had no additional hidden revival. With the commander removed, Gu entered the center of the army and expanded Nine Heavens' Divine Thunder into a moving sea of controlled lightning. Will of Hongjun reduced the mana cost while Fortune Preserver restored resources faster than Gu could spend them, making sustained forbidden level casting practical. Before each large strike, Gu used Spirit Perception to confirm that no kingdom prisoners or neutral targets occupied the selected region. The lightning tracked hostile demons individually, instead of flattening every tent and road indiscriminately, allowing much of the environment to survive the bombardment. Gu handled the densest central camp, while the Nether Emperor moved around the perimeter, creating two expanding destruction fronts that rarely crossed the same ground. Kill notifications refreshed in enormous batches as millions became tens of millions, then far more, while Gu's level climbed through repeated breakthroughs. From this distant capital, defenders could see only continuous lightning illuminating the horizon and had no idea how quickly the mission counter was collapsing. Cheng Yu and Chu Tianming shared enough experience to reach around level 60, repeatedly asking whether Gu needed support, despite knowing he was not trapped. Gu ordered them to protect the king, because bringing two level 60 allies into a battlefield of billions would create more distractions than useful damage. The Lightning Sea and Purple Clearing Path continued converging until the system finally confirmed that every one of the required 2 billion heavenly demons had been eliminated. The battlefield became suddenly quiet, and the mission confirmation proved no enemy had escaped the count. Through hiding, tunnels, transport, or deceptive faction changes, Gu still sent the Nether Emperor on one final patrol before trusting the result, preferring redundant verification over discovering a surviving unit after relaxing. Mission guidance then directed him toward a marked location near the destroyed command area, where, like Sword, chest remained sealed until every surviving party member arrived. Cheng Yu and Chu Tianming traveled from the capital on kingdom mounts, passing empty camps and lightning scars that finally showed them the physical scale of 2 billion deaths. Neither joked much along the route because the silent landscape made Gu's earlier mission numbers feel far more real than constant system notifications ever had. Once all three stood together, the chest opened automatically, preventing any leader from claiming party rewards, while surviving companions remained elsewhere in the scenario. The main drops included a legendary bloodthirsty demon saber, an epic heavenly demon bracer, and an Earth-tier Golden Eyes skill book. Chu Tianming wanted the legendary saber, even though his own mage class could not use it, because his father was a warrior with comparatively ordinary personal equipment. The older man had spent years directing family resources toward his son's growth, and Chu Tianming wanted the approaching birthday to become a chance to repay that support, rather than demand friendship pricing. He offered to purchase the weapon at an independent appraised value and divide the payment fairly among the party. Gu accepted because the reason was sincere, and the arrangement respected everyone's contribution without pretending a legendary item had no market value. A reputable merchant association could determine the price later, preventing Chu Tianming from overpaying emotionally, or the others from undervaluing a rare weapon. Cheng Yu immediately claimed that his own father's birthday was also approaching, an excuse so obviously profiled that Gu refused to entertain the performance. Gu simply threw him the epic heavenly demon bracer for free, and Cheng Yu forgot the fake story the moment he began studying its statistics. With one reward assigned to each companion, the remaining Golden Eyes book naturally became Gu's share, and matched his Taoist class directly. The original skill already weakened every enemy attribute, maximum health and mana, by a significant percentage for a limited duration. Its greatest weakness was continuous mana consumption, something ordinary class soldiers could not maintain casually, even though the effect could decide an evenly matched battle. Gu saw a much greater opportunity because the skill book remained an unevolved object, exactly the kind of foundation his system transformed most efficiently. 600,000 evolution points disappeared after confirmation, and Golden Eyes advanced directly from Earth tier into True Lord's vertical eye at Divine tier. The evolved ability opened a vertical eye at Gu's brow and reduced enemy attributes, health and mana, by 99% while active. That reduction affected underlying values rather than deleting class names or equipment structures, compressing an opponent's effective foundation to roughly 1/100th of normal. True Lord's vertical eye consumed only 1 mana each second, an irrelevant cost beside Gu's current pool and natural regeneration. The system calculated a theoretical duration of hundreds of days, even without recovery, meaning practical continuous use was nearly unlimited under ordinary conditions. if a target's spirit remained below Gu's. The eye also imposed several seconds of mental suppression, before a short gap allowed the same opponent to recover. Stronger spirit or control immunity could resist the suppression, but the 99% weakening would still apply, unless another mechanic specifically blocked it. Closing the ability left a faint golden vertical mark on Gu's forehead, while opening it created a new viewpoint that revealed enemy panel changes directly. The transformation caused no pain. Yet, Gu used his hair to hide the mark, because a visible mythic feature would attract questions everywhere outside a dungeon. Palm Thunder had evolved toward Divine Lightning. Soul Summoning had become the Nether Emperor. And Golden Eyes now resembled the mythical eye of a heavenly judge. Gu realized the evolution system was not merely increasing numbers. It repeatedly pushed ordinary Taoist concepts toward the mythological forms they implied. He still did not know the final endpoint, but every evolution made the original F-tier classification look more detached from his actual future. The party left the completed dungeon after confirming Gu could close the vertical eye reliably, and that no additional reward remained hidden in the mission space. Their convoy traveled beyond the city military patrol range before several vehicles and armed people suddenly blocked the road through an abandoned construction zone. 2 sports utility vehicles sealed the rear, while unfinished buildings and empty lots removed witnesses from both sides, proving the location had been chosen in advance. The next official patrol point was several miles away, giving attackers a window to finish the ambush before ordinary reinforcements could reach the convoy. Chung Yu ordered bodyguards to stay inside because anyone confident enough to block a great family's vehicles probably had more preparation than the visible fighters suggested. Xiaoying stood behind the formation, wearing Black Sun Rose colors openly, no longer bothering to hide the connection he had denied at the examination plaza. The attackers formed disciplined rows, with melee class holders blocking the road, while ranged fighters positioned themselves outside normal vehicle retaliation distance. Chu Tianming exited first and challenged them verbally, while Xiaoying warned him not to interfere with what he still pretended was a personal dispute. Their local leader, Huang Chong, immediately expanded the target list and declared that nobody present would leave alive once the attack officially began. Killing Chung Yu could destabilize a major capital family, while killing Chu Tianming would strike another powerful household and create wider chaos for Black Sun Rose. Xiaoying had paid for Gu's death, but after surrendering family shares, he no longer possessed enough authority to limit what the organization chose to do. The ambush therefore aimed at 3 goals simultaneously: remove Gu, damage both great families, and eliminate incoming Funyun University students before enrollment. Chung Yu quietly offered to remain behind, while Gu escaped with Chu Tianming, hoping his family identity might make the attackers hesitate to kill him directly. The decision showed real growth because the spoiled heir from their first meeting was now willing to use his own safety as a shield for companions. He prepared Vermilion Bird Skybreaker and a death substitution item, planning to create enough fire and confusion for the others to break through the roadside formation. Gu rejected the sacrifice because Huang Chong had already named Chung Yu as a priority target, meaning family status no longer offered meaningful protection. Xiaoying urged the attackers forward and boasted that the experienced members around him were level 60, still treating that number as proof Gu could not survive. Gu stepped from the vehicle instead of retreating and asked whether they ever became tired of holding one-sided conversations before every failed attempt on his life. Huang Chong feared city military discovery and ordered immediate action, sending a giant axe fighter forward, while assassins moved through roadside ditches on both flanks. Mages and ranged attackers prepared behind the front line, creating overlapping pressure designed to prevent Gu from escaping toward either vehicles or unfinished buildings. Gu stopped Chung Yu and Chu Tianming from joining because several level 60 enemies provided the perfect controlled test for True Lord's vertical eye. He ordered both companions beside the vehicles, outside the eye's initial enemy assessment, because the new divine skill had never been tested around teammates before. The giant attacker leaped first, with an enormous axe descending directly toward Gu's head, while support abilities began forming behind him. At that instant, the faint golden line on Gu's brow opened into a vertical pupil that seemed to observe the entire surrounding space simultaneously. True Lord's vertical eye activated without projectile travel, instantly reducing the charging enemy's health, mana, strength, agility, and spirit by 99%. The giant's swollen muscles visibly contracted, His momentum collapsed, and the heavy axe suddenly became a burden his weakened body could barely control. Several offensive skills remained listed on his panel, but deactivated because the reduced attributes no longer satisfied their minimum strength, mana, or state requirements. That confirmed the eye did not erase abilities directly. It weakened the foundations supporting them until many techniques could no longer function at all. The result was more devastating than a normal debuff, because an experienced level 60 fighter temporarily fell below the practical scale of low-level monsters. Gu also observed that the weakening had no visible travel time, making conventional dodging useless once a target entered the eye's effective enemy recognition range. Mental suppression followed, because the attacker's reduced spirit stood far beneath Gu's, leaving the giant dazed before the axe could complete its fall. Gu did not kill him with divine lightning, since the purpose of this battle was understanding the new skill without destroying the road, vehicles, and every trace. Instead, Gu prepared to test whether ordinary physical attacks became sufficient once the vertical eye compressed a high-level enemy's entire combat foundation. The remaining Black Sun Rose members still believed numbers could compensate, so several moved at once while their own status panels entered the Divine Eye's field. One after another, their attributes collapsed to tiny fractions, breaking active transformations and making heavy equipment suddenly difficult for weakened bodies to handle. Gu drew the Azure Lotus Sword but did not activate its absolute formation, wanting the cleanest possible comparison between basic speed and weakened level 60 opponents. His evolved base agility already exceeded theirs before the debuff, and the 99% reduction turned the movement gap into something almost impossible to perceive. Gu vanished from the first attacker's sight, crossed between several enemies, and struck only after confirming Chung Yu and Chu Tianming remained outside the path. Fine wounds appeared almost together as multiple fighters collapsed before the 6-second control cycle had even finished its first complete sequence. No broad lightning flash exposed the location, no explosive formation damaged the road, and nearby vehicles remained intact despite the sudden elimination of the frontline group. Xiaoying finally understood that bringing level 60 reinforcements had not closed the distance, because Gu had gained another ability that made level itself almost meaningless. Huang Chong stopped treating the teenager as a strange student and began studying him as an unknown high-priority threat, missing from Black Sun Rose intelligence. Gu kept walking forward and asked whether level 60 was really supposed to be impressive, since both companions behind him were already approaching that range themselves. Furious and cornered, Huang Chong abandoned caution and prepared the complete beast transformation reserved for important Black Sun Rose members. Huang Chong stayed near Xiaoying instead of joining the first charge, protecting the employer while watching carefully for whatever method had already destroyed his subordinates. Gu kept Chung Yu and Chu Tianming beside the vehicles because the new vertical eye had never been tested around allies during a live human battle. He did not yet know whether its enemy assessment might misread nearby teammates, or whether the 99% reduction required any hidden activation delay. The giant axe fighter provided the first clean test by leaping directly toward Gu with enough momentum to crush an ordinary class holder beneath the weapon. As the blade descended, the faint golden mark on Gu's forehead opened sideways into a vertical pupil that seemed to observe the entire battlefield at once. True, Lord's vertical eye activated without a projectile, chant, or visible travel path, applying its effect the instant the attacker entered the skill's judgment range. The giant's strength fell from tens of thousands to only a few hundred, while health, mana, agility, and spirit collapsed by the same 99%. His axe did not become lighter, so the suddenly weakened fighter lost control of the weapon and felt both arms dragged downward by its unchanged weight. The man's class, level, equipment, names, and learned abilities remained visible, proving the vertical eye had not erased his progression structure from the system. Instead, Giant Axe Bloodlust and Berserk Blow shut down automatically because the reduced statistics no longer satisfied the abilities, strength, mana, and state requirements. Gu immediately understood the distinction. The Divine Eye weakened the foundation, supporting skill rather than deleting the skill itself from an opponent's class. Every Black Sun Rose member inside the range suffered the same collapse, causing prepared fire, binding formations, stealth movement, and other techniques to lose stability together. A large fireball shrank into a tiny spark. A binding formation died before completion. An assassin stumbled from roadside cover when their agility suddenly disappeared. 99% reduction did not technically remove their classes, yet it compressed experienced level 60 bodies beneath the practical scale of many low-level monsters. Huang Chong initially resisted the first mental suppression because he stood near the edge of the assessment range and carried stronger protection than ordinary members. Seeing the giant still holding his axe, Huang Chong incorrectly concluded that Gu's strange eye only interrupted casting and ordered everyone to switch toward basic attacks. That command made the next result worse, because the remaining attackers stepped deeper into the range while their reduced spirit created perfect conditions for mental suppression. Golden influence passed across the group, and several fighters suddenly stared forward without focus as the connection between consciousness and physical movement temporarily stopped responding. Their active spells vanished from their hands. Weapons froze in half-completed motions, and even standing upright became difficult once the daze fully settled. Chung Yu waved a hand before one attacker's eyes and received no response, confirming that the effect was genuine control rather than simple hesitation from fear. The suppression lasted roughly 5 seconds and could affect the same target again after the short cooldown, leaving only a narrow recovery gap between cycles. Gu had already learned enough from the foot soldiers and refused to waste more time observing enemies, whose reduced health had fallen to 1% of normal. He drew the Azure Lotus sword, but deliberately left Immortal Slaying Absolute Formation inactive, choosing ordinary sword strikes to measure how much the weakening alone changed combat. Gu's evolved base speed already exceeded theirs before the debuff, and after the reduction the attackers could not meaningfully track his movement across the roadside battlefield. Several narrow sword flashes appeared almost together as Gu crossed between enemies, selecting precise targets rather than releasing destructive lightning. Beside the convoy and unfinished buildings, he first disabled weapon-bearing arms where necessary, then struck vital points, only after confirming no recovering attacker could threaten Chung Yu or Chu Tianming behind him. By the time Gu returned to his original position, every level 60-foot soldier had fallen, and less than one complete suppression cycle had passed. Their wounds remained fine and controlled because Gu used physical speed rather than broad divine attacks, leaving the road, vehicles, and surrounding structures almost completely intact. Xiaoying's confidence finally broke when he realized the reinforcements he had purchased with family interests could not survive several seconds against the student he hated. Huang Chong abandoned his earlier contempt and demanded Gu's identity, admitting through the questions that Black Sun Rose intelligence had no record of power like this. Gu kept walking and asked whether level 60 was truly supposed to be impressive when both companions behind him were already approaching the same range themselves. The answer enraged Huang Chong enough to abandon cautious observation and trigger the complete beast transformation, reserved for important members of the organization. Red light spread across his body, while the transformation mark ignited along the spine from the back of his neck toward the waist instead of across the chest. Muscles expanded visibly, but the real danger appeared in the status panel, as strength, agility, spirit, health, and combat output rose far beyond his previous state. This forbidden art was more complete than the versions Gu had encountered during the examination, showing that Chongshong occupied a much higher position inside Black Sun Rose. His class was Mystic Nether Death Warrior around level 75, supported by a Black Death Sword, Emerald Jade equipment, and several lethal burst techniques. Bloodmad World Slaughter increased offensive power through injury. Chaotic Blade Tempest controlled a broad area, and Death Energy Breath threatened targets beyond normal melee range. Any one of those abilities could kill Chung Yu or Chu Tianming before a life-saving item activated. If the two heirs fought Huang Chong carelessly, the transformation pushed some displayed values into the millions, and Huang Chong's arrogance returned when he saw numbers he believed no young student could challenge. He boasted that only a handful of enemies had ever forced him to use the complete form during more than a decade of serious fighting. Huang Chong did not attack immediately because he wanted Gu to understand the apparent gap while the transformation stabilized, and his strongest techniques finished preparing. Death energy gathered across the Black Death Sword as the Emerald Jade set continuously repaired the physical damage caused by Huang Chong's own changing bones. The forbidden art carried a real cost, since maintaining that abnormal body consumed him every second, even while the equipment worked to keep the transformation stable. Gu waited until the final statistics settled, then opened True Lord's vertical eye again, and applied the 99% weakening to the completed transformation. Huang Chong's enormous health and mana collapsed immediately, while strength, agility, and spirit fell from terrifying transformed values into numbers Gu could handle casually. The amplification had not been protected by activating first, because the eye calculated its reduction from Huang Chong's final current panel rather than his original base state. For the first time, Huang Chong believed the reports from his defeated subordinates. Yet, he still tried to kill Gu before another suppression cycle could immobilize him. Even after weakening, Huang Chong retained enough strength and agility to threaten normal class holders, unlike the foot soldiers who had become almost unable to fight. Against Tsu's Starfall Emperor armor and vastly higher attributes, however, those reduced numbers were nowhere near enough to restore the advantage Huang Chong expected. The moment he raised the Black Death Sword, True Lord's vertical eye triggered mental suppression, because his weakened spirit now sat far below Gu's own. Huang Chong's limbs stiffened while his awareness felt dragged towards sleep, and the forming chaotic blade tempest dispersed before the technique could stabilize around him. He tried to force himself awake through pain, even biting his own tongue. But the physical shock could not cancel divine control already supported by the spirit difference. The Black Death Sword stopped in midair, leaving Huang Chong trapped inside the exact kind of helpless state his organization normally imposed on weaker victims. Gu did not kill him because the foot soldiers had already proved the vertical eye could create a safe execution window whenever that became necessary. What Gu needed now was information about Black Sun Rose, the benching branch, and how deeply the Xiao family participated in the organization's operations. Killing Huang Chong immediately would remove one dangerous enemy, but also destroy the best prisoner Gu had encountered since the examination attack began. The mental suppression created only a short recovery interval between cycles, while the 99% weakening could remain active continuously, as long as Gu kept the eye open. Even if Huang Chong recovered during that brief gap, his reduced speed remained far below Gu's perception and nowhere near enough to escape the surrounding group. Cheng Yu and Chu Tianming moved behind Gu and guarded the road while Xiaoying retreated farther away, watching his expensive ambush collapse into an interrogation scene. The balance of power had reversed so completely that the Black Sun Rose leader now depended on Gu, choosing not to finish him during the next few seconds. Gu used the pause to study the transformation mark along Huang Chong's spine, comparing it with the weaker chest marks seen on ordinary members inside the examination dungeon. The different placement and stability suggested Black Sun Rose possessed multiple levels of forbidden transformation, rather than one identical technique issued to every recruit. Huang Chong's equipment also mattered because the Emerald Jade set had spent the entire transformation repairing damage caused by the forbidden art itself. That meant stronger members paid a continuous biological cost for their temporary power and required expensive gear to prevent the process from destroying them too quickly. Gu stored the observation because understanding how the organization created combat power could become more useful than memorizing the name of one defeated enemy. The first 5-second suppression ended, and Huang Chong's awareness returned, while the vertical eye continued, holding every major statistic at 1% of the transformed value. He immediately recognized that Gu had intentionally waited instead of failing to attack, which made the situation more frightening than a simple, overwhelming strike would have been. Huang Chong now knew the teenager could have killed him during the days, and had chosen restraint only because information was worth more than another corpse. This Gu remained within easy striking distance, demonstrating that he did not consider the weakened leader's remaining speed or weapon dangerous enough to justify stepping back. Cheng Yu and Chu Tianming stayed ready, but did not interfere, following the command discipline Gu had demanded before the difficulty 50 mission began. Xiaoying had no such discipline and kept retreating, because every Black Sun Rose fighter he trusted had either died or become completely powerless within minutes. Gu told Huang Chong to relax and endure the discomfort, using an almost casual tone that made the defeated leader understand how one-sided the encounter had become. Fear appeared openly in Huang Chong's expression for the first time since the ambush, replacing the confidence built from rank, experience, transformation, and numbers. He stared at the vertical pupil and finally understood that the ability had not merely stunned him. It had rewritten the practical meaning of his entire status panel. The 99% reduction remained visible across health, mana, strength, agility, and spirit even after his consciousness returned from the mental suppression. Huang Chong could still feel the complete beast transformation consuming his body, but almost none of its intended combat advantage remained available under the Divine Eye. His strongest area attack had already collapsed once, and trying to rebuild it risked triggering suppression before he could complete the activation requirements. Death Energy Breath offered range but still depended on statistics and control that Gu's Eye had reduced to a fraction of their transformed values. Blood Mad World Slaughter could grow stronger through injury, yet increasing a weakened final panel could not realistically bridge the enormous difference between them. Therefore held every meaningful advantage while spending almost no mana. Proving True Lord's Vertical Eye might be more strategically valuable than another pure damage evolution. Divine Lightning could erase a battlefield, but the Vertical Eye could preserve prisoners, disable skills, protect terrain, and reduce stronger enemies without destroying evidence. That versatility solved the exact problem Gu had identified after accidentally carbonizing earlier Black Sun Rose attackers before they could answer his questions. The new skill also allowed Gu to fight near vehicles, allies, and city infrastructure without relying on an attack powerful enough to create massive collateral damage. For Cheng Yu and Chu Tianming, the confrontation became another lesson that Gu's progression was no longer defined by a single overwhelming lightning technique. Xiaoying had prepared specifically for the powers he knew about. Yet one newly evolved control ability had invalidated the entire ambush before its strongest fighter finished transforming. Black Sun Throw's intelligence would face the same problem if Gu kept revealing only what each situation required, instead of displaying every evolved skill at once. Intended to exploit that uncertainty, especially now that Huang Chong could provide information about the branch, before anyone outside the construction zone knew the ambush had failed. The road remains sealed by enemy vehicles, but that obstacle no longer mattered because every surviving hostile fighter was either dead, weakened, dazed, or hiding behind the formation. No city military patrol had arrived yet, giving Gu a short window to question Huang Chong before deciding whether to hand the prisoner to official authorities. He also needed to determine whether additional Black Sun Rose members were waiting nearby, since an organization planning this carefully might have prepared a second interception layer. The Nether Emperor remained available. The Starfall set was undamaged, and both companions still held their family emergency items, leaving Gu with multiple options if reinforcements appeared. Huang Chong no longer possessed the same freedom, because complete beast transformation continued consuming his body while True Lord's Vertical Eye suppressed the power gained from it. Every second he delayed cooperation therefore cost him physically, without improving his chance of escaping, a reality visible in the strain across his transformed body. Gu did not need to threaten torture or invent another punishment, since the failed transformation and divine weakening already demonstrated exactly how powerless the leader had become. The immediate battle was effectively over, but the information inside Huang Chong's head could connect Xiaoying, his father, and the benching branch more clearly than circumstantial evidence. Gu kept the Vertical Eye open and waited through the brief control gap, ready to suppress Huang Chong again. The instant his behavior suggested another attack, Cheng Yu and Chu Tianming maintained the perimeter while Xiaoying watched from farther back, no longer protected by the level 60 and level 70 fighters he purchased. Huang Chong regained full awareness, but not his strength, staring at Gu with genuine fear as the 99% reduction continued across his panel. He finally stopped posturing like an experienced Black Sun Rose leader and began reacting like a prisoner who understood that resistance would only trigger another effortless suppression. At the source's stopping point, Gu controlled the road, protected both companions, and held Huang Chong alive under True Lord's Vertical Eye for questioning.